The Baptism of the Lord, from the Douay version of the Bible, Matthew chapter 3, verses 1 through 17, for LibriVox.org, narrated by Sean McKinley. And in those days cometh John the Baptist, preaching in the desert of Judea, and saying, Do penance, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. For this is he that was spoken of by Isaiah the prophet, saying, A voice of one crying in the desert, Prepare ye the way of the Lord, make straight his paths. And the same John had his garment of camel's hair, and a leathern girdle about his loins, and his meat was locusts and wild honey. Then went out to him Jerusalem and all Judea, and all the country about Jordan, and were baptized by him in the Jordan, confessing their sins. And seeing many of the Pharisees and Sadducees coming to his baptism, he said to them, Ye brood of vipers, who hath shewed you to flee from the wrath to come? Bring forth therefore fruit worthy of penance, and think not to say within yourselves, We have Abraham for our father. For I tell you that God is able of these stones to raise up children to Abraham. For now the axe is laid to the root of the trees. Every tree therefore that doth not yield good fruit shall be cut down, and cast into the fire. I indeed baptize you in water unto penance, but he that shall come after me is mightier than I, whose shoes I am not worthy to bear. He shall baptize you in the Holy Ghost and fire, whose fan is in his hand, and he will thoroughly cleanse his floor and gather his wheat into the barn. But the chaff he will burn with an unquenchable fire. Then cometh Jesus from Galilee to the Jordan unto John, to be baptized by him. But John stayed him, saying, I ought to be baptized by thee, and comest thou to me? And Jesus answering said to him, Suffer it to be so now, for so it becometh us to fulfill all justice. Then he suffered him. And Jesus, being baptized, forthwith came out of the water. And lo, the heavens were opened to him, and he saw the Spirit of God descending as a dove, and coming upon him. And behold, a voice from heaven saying, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. End of the Baptism of the Lord. This recording is in the public domain.
Christmas by Paul Laurence Dunbar. Read for LibriVox.org by Douglas Nathaniel Williams. Step with the banjo and glide with the fiddle. This ain't no time for the potter and piddle, for Christmas is comin', it's right on the way, and it's ours to dance for the break of the day. What if the wind is tearin' and whistlin'? Look at that fire, how it's spittin' and bristlin', heatin' the ashes and heatin' the cinders. Old Mr. Frost can just look through these windows. Heat up the toddy and pass the warm glasses. Don't stop to shiver at blowin's and blasts. Keep on the kittle and keep it a-hummin'. Eat all and drink all, there's lots a-comin'. Look here, Maria, don't open that oven. You want all these people a-pushin' and shovin'? Rest from the dance? Yes, you done cotch that odor. Mammy done cotched it, and Lord, it nigh flowed her. Possum is monstrous for making folks find it. Come, draw up your cheers. I do mind it. Eat up them critters, you men folks and womens. Possums ain't scarce when there's lots of persimmons. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information and to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Christmas Every Day by William Dean Howells. Read for LibriVox by Susan Denny, Denton, Texas, 2006. The little girl came into her papa's study, as she always did Saturday morning before breakfast, and asked for a story. He tried to beg off that morning, for he was very busy, but she would not let him, so he began. "Well, once there was a little pig." She stopped him at the word. She said she had heard little pig stories till she was perfectly sick of them. "Well, what kind of stories shall I tell, then?" "About Christmas. It's getting to be the season." "Well," her papa roused himself, "then I'll tell you about the little girl that wanted it Christmas every day in the year. How would you like that?" "First rate," said the little girl, and she nestled into comfortable shape in his lap, ready for listening. "Very well, then. This little pig—" "Oh, what are you pounding me for?" "Because you said little pig instead of little girl." "I should like to know what's the difference between a little pig and a little girl that wanted it Christmas every day." "Papa?" said the little girl warningly. At this her papa began to tell the story. Once there was a little girl who liked Christmas so much that she wanted it to be Christmas every day in the year, and as soon as Thanksgiving was over she began to send postcards to the old Christmas fairy to ask if she mightn't have it. But the old fairy never answered, and after a while the little girl found out that the fairy wouldn't notice anything but real letters sealed outside with the monogram, or your initial anyway. So then she began to send letters, and just the day before Christmas she got a letter from the fairy saying she might have it Christmas every day for a year, and then they would see about having it longer. The little girl was excited already, preparing for the old-fashioned once-a-year Christmas that was coming the next day, so she resolved to keep the fairy's promise to herself and surprise everybody with it as it kept coming true, but then it slipped out of her mind altogether. She had a splendid Christmas. She went to bed early so as to let Santa Claus fill the stockings, and in the morning she was up the first of anybody and found hers all lumpy with packages of candy and oranges and grapes and rubber balls and all kinds of small presents. Then she waited until the rest of the family was up, and she burst into the library to look at the large presents laid out on the library table. Books and boxes of stationery and dolls and little stoves and dozens of handkerchiefs and inkstands and skates and photograph frames and boxes of watercolor and dolls' houses and the big Christmas tree lighted and standing in the middle. She had a splendid Christmas all day. She ate so much candy that she did not want any breakfast, and the whole forenoon the presents kept pouring in that had not been delivered the night before, and she went round giving the presents she had got for other people, and came home and ate turkey and cranberry for dinner, and plum pudding and nuts and raisins and oranges, and then went out and coasted, and came in with a stomachache crying, and her papa said he would see if his house was turned into that sort of fool's paradise another year, and they had a light supper, and pretty early everybody went to bed cross. The little girl slept very heavily and very late, but she was wakened at last by the other children dancing around her bed with their stockings full of presents in their hands. "Christmas! Christmas! Christmas!" they all shouted. "Nonsense! It was Christmas yesterday," said the little girl, rubbing her eyes sleepily. Her brother and sisters just laughed. "We don't know about that. It's Christmas today, anyway. You come into the library and see." Then all at once it flashed on the little girl that the fairy was keeping her promise, and her year of Christmases was beginning. She was dreadfully sleepy, but she sprang up and darted into the library. There it was again, books and boxes of stationery and dolls, and so on. There was the Christmas tree blazing away, and the family picking out their presents, and her father looking perfectly puzzled, and her mother ready to cry. "I'm sure I don't see how I'm to dispose of all these things," said her mother, and her father said it seemed to him that they had had something like it the day before, but he supposed he must have dreamed it. This struck the little girl as the best kind of a joke, and so she ate so much candy she didn't want any breakfast, and went around carrying presents, and had turkey and cranberry for dinner, and then went out and coasted and came in with a stomachache crying. Now the next day it was the same thing over again, but everybody getting crosser. And at the end of a week's time, so many people had lost their tempers that you could pick up lost tempers anywhere. They perfectly strewed the ground. Even when people tried to recover their tempers, they usually got somebody else's, and it made the most dreadful mix. The little girl began to get frightened, keeping the secret all to herself. She wanted to tell her mother, but she didn't dare to, and she was ashamed to ask the fairy to take back her gift. It seemed ungrateful and ill-bred. So it went on, and it was Christmas on St. Valentine's Day, and Washington's birthday, just the same as any day, and it didn't skip even the 1st of April, though everything was counterfeit that day, and that was some little relief. After a while, turkeys got to be awfully scarce, selling for about $1,000 apiece. They got to passing off almost anything for turkeys, even half-grown hummingbirds. And cranberries, well, they asked $1 apiece for cranberries. All the woods and orchards were cut down for Christmas trees. After a while, they had to make Christmas trees out of rags. But there were plenty of rags, because people got so poor buying presents for one another that they couldn't get any new clothes, and they just wore their old ones to tatters. They got so poor that everybody had to go to the poorhouse except the confectioners and the storekeepers and the booksellers, and they all got so rich and proud that they would hardly wait upon a person when he came to buy. It was perfectly shameful. After it had gone on about 3 or 4 months, the little girl, whenever she came into the room in the morning and saw those great, ugly, lumpy stockings dangling at the fireplace, and the disgusting presents around everywhere, used to sit down and burst out crying. In 6 months she was perfectly exhausted, so she couldn't even cry any more. And how it was on the 4th of July! On the 4th of July, the first boy in the United States woke up and found out that his firecrackers and toy pistol and $2 collection of fireworks were nothing but sugar and candy painted up to look like fireworks. Before 10 o'clock, every boy in the United States discovered that his July 4th things had turned into Christmas things, and was so mad. The 4th of July orations all turned into Christmas carols, and when anybody tried to read the Declaration of Independence, instead of saying, "When in the course of human events it becomes necessary," he was sure to sing, "God rest ye merry gentlemen." It was perfectly awful. About the beginning of October, the little girl took to sitting down on dolls wherever she found them. She hated the sight of them so, and by Thanksgiving she just slammed her presents across the room. By that time people didn't carry presents around nicely anymore. They flung them over the fence or through the window, and instead of taking great pains to write, "For dear Papa," or "Mama," or "Brother," or "Sister," they used to write, "Take it, you horrid old thing," and then go bang it against the front door. Nearly everybody had built barns to hold their presents, but pretty soon the barns overflowed, and then they used to let them lie out in the rain or anywhere. Sometimes the police used to come and tell them to shovel their presents off the sidewalk, or they would arrest them. Before Thanksgiving came, it had leaked out who had caused all these Christmases. The little girl had suffered so much that she had talked about it in her sleep, and after that hardly anybody would play with her, because if it had not been for her greediness, it wouldn't have happened. And now, when it came Thanksgiving, and she wanted them to go to church and have turkey and show their gratitude, they said that all the turkeys had been eaten for her old Christmas dinners, and if she would stop the Christmases, they would see about the gratitude. And the very next day the little girl began sending letters to the Christmas fairy, and then telegrams to stop it. But it didn't do any good, and then she got to calling at the fairy's house. But the girl that came to the door always said, "Not at home," or "Engaged," or something like that, and so it went on till it came to the old once-a-year Christmas Eve. The little girl fell asleep, and when she woke up in the morning, she found out it was all nothing but a dream, suggested the little girl. No, indeed, said her papa. It was all every bit true. What did she find out then? Why, that it wasn't Christmas at last, and wasn't ever going to be any more. Now it's time for breakfast. The little girl held her papa fast around the neck. You shan't go if you're going to leave it so. How do you want it left? Christmas once a year. All right, said her papa, and he went on again. Well, with no Christmas ever again, there was the greatest rejoicing all over the country. People met everywhere and kissed and cried for joy. Carts went around and gathered up all the candy and raisins and nuts and dumped them into the river, and it made the fish perfectly sick. And the whole United States, as far out as Alaska, was one blaze of bonfires where the children were burning up their presents of all kinds. They had the greatest time. The little girl went to thank the old fairy because she had stopped its being Christmas, and she said she hoped the fairy would keep her promise and see that Christmas never, never came again. Then the fairy frowned and said that now the little girl was behaving just as greedily as ever, and she'd better look out. This made the little girl think it all over carefully again, and she said she would be willing to have it Christmas about once in 1,000 years. And then she said 100, and then she said 10, and at last she got down to 1. Then the fairy said that that was the good old way that had pleased people ever since Christmas began, and she was agreed. Then the little girl said, What are your shoes made of? And the fairy said, Leather. And the little girl said, Bargain's done forever, and skipped off and hippity-hopped the whole way home. She was so glad. How will that do? Asked the papa. First rate, said the little girl, but she hated to have the story stop, and so was rather sober. However, her mamma put her head in at the door and asked her papa, Are you never coming to breakfast? What have you been telling that child? Oh, just a tale with a moral. The little girl caught him around the neck again. We know. Don't you tell what, papa? Don't you tell what? End of Christmas Every Day by William Dean Howells.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information and to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Christmas Gift That Came to Rupert, a story for small soldiers, from Mrs. Skaggs's Husbands and Other Stories, by Bret Harte. Read for LibriVox.org by Alan Drake in October of 2006 in Long Branch, New Jersey, at drakesdoor.org. It was the Christmas season in California, a season of falling rain and springing grasses. There were intervals when, through driving clouds and flying scud, the sun visited the haggard hills with a miracle, and death and resurrection were as one. And out of the very throes of decay, a joyous life struggled outward and upward. Even the storms that swept down the dead leaves nurtured the tender buds that took their places. There were no episodes of snowy silence. Over the quickening fields the farmer's plowshare hard followed the furrows left by the latest rains. Perhaps it was for this reason that the Christmas evergreens, which decorated the drawing-room, took upon themselves a foreign aspect, and offered a weird contrast to the roses, seen dimly through the windows, as the southwest wind beat their soft faces against the panes. "Now," said the doctor, drawing his chair closer to the fire, and looking mildly but firmly at the semicircle of flaxen heads around him, "I want it distinctly understood before I begin my story that I am not to be interrupted by any ridiculous questions. At the first one I shall stop, At the second, I shall feel it my duty to administer a dose of castor oil all around. The boy that moves his legs or arms will be understood to invite amputation. I have brought my instruments with me, and never allow pleasure to interfere with my business. Do you promise?" "Yes, sir," said 6 small voices simultaneously. The volley was, however, followed by a half-dozen dropping questions. "Silence! Bob, put your feet down and stop rattling that sword. Flora shall sit by my side like a little lady, and be an example to the rest. Fung Tang shall stay too, if he likes. Now, turn down the gas a little. There, that will do. Just enough to make the fire look brighter, and to show off the Christmas candles. Silence, everybody. The boy who cracks an almond or breathes too loud over his raisins will be put out of the room." There was a profound silence. Bob laid his sword tenderly aside and nursed his leg thoughtfully. Flora, after coquettishly adjusting the pocket of her little apron, put her arm upon the doctor's shoulder, and permitted herself to be drawn beside him. Fung Tang, the little heathen page who was permitted on this rare occasion to share the Christian revels in the drawing-room, surveyed the group with a smile that was at once sweet and philosophical. The light ticking of a French clock on the mantel, supported by a young shepherdess of bronze complexion and great symmetry of limb, was the only sound that disturbed the Christmas-like peace of the apartment, a peace which held the odors of evergreens, new toys, cedar boxes, glue, and varnish, in a harmonious combination that passed all understanding. "About 4 years ago this time," began the doctor, "I attended a course of lectures in a certain city. One of the professors, who was a sociable, kindly man, though somewhat practical and hard-headed, invited me to his house on Christmas night. I was very glad to go, as I was anxious to see one of his sons, who, though only 12 years old, was said to be very clever. I dare not tell you how many Latin verses this little fellow could recite, or how many English ones he had composed. In the first place, you'd want me to repeat them. Secondly, I'm not a judge of poetry, Latin or English, but there were judges who said they were wonderful for a boy, and everybody predicted a splendid future for him. Everybody but his father. He shook his head doubtingly whenever it was mentioned, for, as I have told you, he was a practical, matter-of-fact man. There was a pleasant party at the professor's that night. All the children of the neighborhood were there, and among them the professor's clever son, Rupert, as they called him, a thin little chap, about as tall as Bobby there, and as fair and delicate as Flora by my side. His health was feeble, his father said. He seldom ran about and played with other boys, preferred to stay at home and brood over his books, and compose what he called his verses. Well, we had a Christmas tree just like this, and we had been laughing and talking, calling off the names of the children who had presents on the tree, and everybody was very happy and joyous, when one of the children suddenly uttered a cry of mingled surprise and hilarity, and said, "Here's something for Rupert, and what do you think it is?" We all guessed. A desk, a copy of Milton, a gold pen, a rhyming dictionary? No? What then? A drum. A what? Asked everybody. A drum with Rupert's name on it. Sure enough, there it was, a good-sized, bright, new, brass-bound drum with a slip of paper on it, with the inscription, "For Rupert." Of course, we all laughed and thought it a good joke. "You see, you're to make noise in the world, Rupert," said one. "Here's parchment for the poet," said another. "Rupert's last work in sheepskin covers," said a third. "Give us a classic tune, Rupert," said a fourth, and so on. But Rupert seemed too mortified to speak. He changed color, bit his lips, and finally burst into a passionate fit of crying, and left the room. Then those who had joked him felt ashamed, and everybody began to ask who had put the drum there. But no one knew, or if they did, the unexpected sympathy awakened for the sensitive boy kept them silent. Even the servants were called up and questioned, but no one could give any idea where it came from. And what was still more singular, everybody declared that up to the moment it was produced, no one had seen it hanging on the tree. What do I think? Well, I have my own opinion, but no questions. Enough for you to know that Rupert did not come downstairs again that night, and the party soon after broke up. I had almost forgotten those things, for the War of the Rebellion broke out the next spring, and I was appointed surgeon in one of the new regiments, and was on my way to the seat of war. But I had to pass through the city where the professor lived, and there I met him. My first question was about Rupert. The professor shook his head sadly. "He's not so well," he said. "He has been declining since last Christmas when you saw him. A very strange case," he added, giving it a long Latin name. "A very singular case. But go and see him yourself," he urged. "It may distract his mind and do him good." I went accordingly to the professor's house, and found Rupert lying on a sofa, propped up with pillows. Around him were scattered his books, and what seemed in singular contrast, that drum I told you about was hanging on a nail just above his head. His face was thin and wasted. There was a red spot on either cheek, and his eyes were very bright and widely opened. He was glad to see me, and when I told him where I was going, he asked 1,000 questions about the war. I thought I had thoroughly diverted his mind from its sick and languid fancies, when he suddenly grasped my hand and drew me towards him. "Doctor," he said in a low whisper, "you won't laugh at me if I tell you something?" "No, certainly not," I said. "You remember that drum?" he said, pointing to the glittering toy that hung around the wall. "You know, too, how it came to me. A few weeks after Christmas, I was lying half asleep here, and the drum was hanging on the wall, when suddenly I heard it beaten. At first low and slowly, then faster and louder, until its rolling filled the house. In the middle of the night I heard it again. I did not dare to tell anybody about it, but I have heard it every night ever since." He paused and looked anxiously in my face. "Sometimes," he continued, "it is played softly, sometimes loudly, but always quickening to a drum roll, so loud and alarming that I have looked to see people coming into my room to ask what was the matter. But I think, doctor, I think," he repeated slowly, looking up with a painful interest into my face, "that no one hears it but myself." I thought so too, but I asked him if he had heard it at any other time. "Once or twice in the daytime," he replied, "when I have been reading or writing, and then very loudly, as though it were angry, and tried in that way to attract my attention away from my books." I looked into his face and placed my hand upon his pulse. His eyes were very bright, and his pulse a little flurried and quick. I then tried to explain to him that he was very weak, and that his senses were very acute, as most weak people's are, and how that when we read or grew interested and excited, or when he was tired at night, the throbbing of a big artery made the beating sound he heard. He listened to me with a sad smile and unbelief, but thanked me, and in a little while I went away. But as I was going downstairs, I met the professor. I gave him my opinion of the case, well, no matter what it was. "He wants some fresh air and exercise," said the professor, "and some practical experience of life, sir." The professor was not a bad man, but he was a little worried and impatient, and thought, as clever people are apt to think, that things which he didn't understand were either silly or improper. I left the city that very day, and in the excitement of battlefields and hospitals, I forgot all about little Rupert, nor did I hear of him again, until one day, meeting an old classmate in the army who had known the professor, he told me that Rupert had become quite insane, and that in one of his paroxysms he had escaped from the house, and as he had never been found, it was feared that he had fallen in the river and was drowned. I was terribly shocked for the moment, as you may imagine, but dear me, I was living just then among scenes as terrible and shocking, and I had little time to spare to mourn over poor Rupert. It was not long after receiving this intelligence that we had a terrible battle, in which a portion of our army was surprised and driven back with great slaughter. I was detached from my brigade to ride over to the battlefield and assist the surgeons of the beaten division, who had more on their hands than they could attend to, when I reached the barn that served for a temporary hospital. I went at once to work. "Ah, Bob," said the doctor, thoughtfully taking the bright sword from the hands of the half-frightened Bob and holding it gravely before him, "these pretty playthings are symbols of cruel, ugly realities." I turned to a tall, stout Vermonter. He continued very slowly, tracing a pattern on the rug with the point of the scabbard, who was badly wounded in both thighs, but he held up his hands and begged me to help others first, who needed it more than he. I did not at first heed his request, for this kind of unselfishness was very common in the army, but he went on. "For God's sake, doctor, leave me here. There is a drummer boy of our regiment, a mere child, dying, if he isn't dead now. Go and save him first. He lies over there. He saved more than one life. He was at his post in the panic this morning and saved the honor of the regiment." I was so much more impressed by the man's manner than by the substance of his speech, which was, however, corroborated by the other poor fellows stretched around me, that I passed over to where the drummer lay, with his drum beside him. I gave one glance at his face, and yes, Bob, yes, children, it was Rupert. Well, well, it needed not the chalked cross which my brother surgeons had left upon the rough board whenever he lay to show how urgent was the relief he sought. It needed not the prophetic words of the Vermonter, nor the damp that mingled with the brown curls that clung to his pale forehead, to show how hopeless it was now. I called him by name. He opened his eyes larger. I thought in the new vision that was beginning to dawn upon him, and recognized me. He whispered, "I'm glad you have come, but I don't think you can do me any good." I could not tell him a lie. I could not say anything. I only pressed his hand in mine as he went on. "But you will see father, and ask him to forgive me. Nobody is to blame but myself." It was a long time before I understood why the drum came to me that Christmas night, and why it kept calling to me every night, and what it said. I know it now. The work is done, and I am content. Tell Father it is better as it is. I should have lived only to worry and perplex him, and something in me tells me this is right. He lay still for a moment, and then, grasping my hand, said, "Hark!" I listened, but heard nothing but the suppressed moans of the wounded men around me. "The drum," he said faintly. "Don't you hear it? The drum is calling me." He reached out his arm to where it lay, as though he would embrace it. "Listen," he went on. "It's the reveille. There are the ranks drawn up in the review. Don't you see the sunlight flash down the long line of bayonets? Their faces are shining. They present arms. They come to the general, but his face I cannot look at. For the glory round his head, he sees me, he smiles. It is—" And with the name upon his lips that he had learned long ago, he stretched himself wearily upon the planks and lay quite still. "That's all. No question now. Never mind what became of the drum. Who's that snivelling? Bless my soul, where's my pillbox?" End of the story The Christmas Gift That Came to Rupert by Bret Harte.
Christmas in the Heart by Paul Laurence Dunbar. Read for LibriVox.org by Douglas Nathaniel Williams. The snow lies deep upon the ground, and winter's brightness all around decks bravely out the forest sere with jewels of the brave old year. The coasting crowd upon the hill with some new spirit seems to thrill, and all the temple bells that chime ring out the glee of Christmas time. In happy homes the brown oak bough vies with the red-gemmed holly now, and here and there like pearls there show the berries of the mistletoe. A sprig upon the chandelier says to the maidens, "Come not here." Even the pauper of the earth some kindly gift has cheered to mirth. Within his chamber, dim and cold, there sits a grasping miser old. He has no thought save one of gain, to grind and gather and grasp and drain. A peal of bells, a merry shout assails his ear. He gazes out upon a world to him all grey, and snarls, "Why, this is Christmas Day." No man of ice, for shame, for shame, for Christmas Day is no mere name. No, not for you this ringing cheer, this festal season of the year, and not for you the chime of bells from holy temple rolls and swells. In day and deed he has no part who holds not Christmas in his heart. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Christmas Stocking by L. Frank Baum. An ancient Italian legend tells how good St. Nicholas of Padua first gave presents on Christmas Eve by throwing purses in at the open windows of needy people. Purses in those days were knitted of yarn and tied with strings at the open ends. They were not unlike stockings, except that they had no feet. People began to hang these long, empty purses of yarn on their window sills on Christmas Eve, so that St. Nicholas, as he passed by, could put money into them. When money became scarce, the long purses were filled with presents instead, useful things for the big people, and books and toys for the children. In cold countries where windows could not be left opened, folks hung their purses near the fireplace, believing that St. Nicholas would come down the chimney and leave his presents for them. And after the knitted purses went out of fashion, they hung up their stockings, which closely resembled the old-time purses, so that there would be plenty of room for the Christmas presents, and old St. Nicholas, or Santa Claus, who lived on through the ages, would know that he had been expected. That is how the Christmas stocking came to be used, and why it will be used for many generations to come in thousands of homes on each succeeding Christmas Eve. It is a pretty custom, expressing the confidence and trust we feel in that sweet charity which bestows loving remembrances upon the rich and poor, the mighty and the lowly, on each succeeding birthday of our Lord Jesus Christ. For it is most fitting that He, who taught the word charity, should be honored upon His birthnight by a humble imitation of the kindly and generous creed He gave us: peace on earth, goodwill to all, leads us to recognize the truth of the noble text, "It is better to give than to receive." And so, as it teaches us kindliness, goodwill, and charity, may the Christmas stocking endure forever.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information and to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This is the true story of Christmas, taken from the World English Bible and read by Acclivity for LibriVox.org on December the 6th, 2006, in Sussex, England. Now in the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent from God to a city of Galilee named Nazareth, to a virgin pledged to be married to a man whose name was Joseph, of the house of David. The virgin's name was Mary. Having come in, the angel said to her, "Rejoice, highly favoured one, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women." But when she saw him, she was greatly troubled at the saying, and considered what kind of salutation this might be. The angel said to her, "Don't be afraid, Mary, for you have found favour with God. Behold, you will conceive in your womb and bring forth a son, and will call his name Jesus. He will be great, and will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever. There will be no end to his kingdom." Mary said to the angel, "How can this be, seeing I am a virgin?" The angel answered her, "The Holy Spirit will come on you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Therefore also the Holy One who is born from you will be called the Son of God. Behold, Elizabeth, your relative, also has conceived a son in her old age, and this is the 6th month with her who was called barren. For everything spoken by God is possible." Mary said, "Behold, the handmaid of the Lord. Be it to me according to your word." Now the birth of Jesus Christ was like this. For after his mother Mary was engaged to Joseph, before they came together, she was found pregnant by the Holy Spirit. Joseph, her husband, being a righteous man and not willing to make her a public example, intended to put her away secretly. But when he thought about these things, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, "Joseph, son of David, don't be afraid to take to yourself Mary, your wife, for that which is conceived in her is of the Holy Spirit. She shall bring forth a son. You shall call his name Jesus, for it is he who shall save his people from their sins. Now all this happened, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the Lord through the prophet, saying, Behold, the virgin shall be with child, and shall bring forth a son. They shall call his name Emmanuel, which is, being interpreted, God with us. Joseph arose from his sleep, and did as the angel of the Lord commanded him, and took his wife to himself, and didn't know her sexually until she had brought forth her firstborn son. He named him Jesus. Now it happened in those days that a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be enrolled. This was the first enrollment made when Quirinius was governor of Syria. All went to enroll themselves, every one to his own city. Joseph also went up from Galilee, out of the city of Nazareth, into Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and family of David, to enroll himself with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him as wife, being pregnant. It happened, while they were there, that the day had come when she should give birth. She brought forth her firstborn son, and she wrapped him in bands of cloth, and laid him in a feeding trough, because there was no room for them in the inn. There were shepherds in the same country, staying in the field, and keeping watch by night over their flock. Behold, an angel of the Lord stood by them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. The angel said to them, Don't be afraid, for behold, I bring you good news of great joy, which will be to all the people. For there is born to you this day, in the city of David, a Saviour, who is Christ the Lord. This is the sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in strips of cloth, lying in a feeding trough. Suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly army, praising God and saying, Glory to God in the highest, on earth peace, goodwill toward men. It happened, when the angels went away from them into the sky, that the shepherds said to one another, Let's go to Bethlehem now, and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has made known to us. They came with haste, and found both Mary and Joseph, and the baby who was lying in the feeding trough. When they saw it, they publicized widely the saying which was spoken to them about this child. All who heard it wondered at the things which were spoken to them by the shepherds. But Mary kept all these sayings, pondering them in her heart. The shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things that they had heard and seen, just as it was told them. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him. Without him was not anything made that has been made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness hasn't overcome it. There came a man sent from God, whose name was John. The same came as a witness, that he might testify about the light, that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but was sent that he might testify about the light. The true light that enlightens everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, and the world didn't recognize him. He came to his own, and those who were his own didn't receive him. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become God's children, to those who believe in his name, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. The Word became flesh and lived among us. We saw his glory, such glory as of the one and only Son of the Father, full of grace and truth. John testified about him. He cried out, saying, "This was he of whom I said, 'He who comes after me has surpassed me, for he was before me.'" From his fullness we all received grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth were realized through Jesus Christ. No one has seen God at any time. The one and only Son, who is in the bosom of the Father, he has declared him. This is the end of the true story of Christmas, taken from the World English Bible.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. If you'd like to take your seats and settle down. Before we start, this is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, yes, thank you. Please visit LibriVox.org. Now, the LibriVox players tonight will be performing for you a Cornish Christmas play from W. Sandys, 1833. So there you go. Welcome them on stage and have a good evening, everybody. Thank you.
Cornish Christmas Play by William Sandys. Enter the Turkish Knight.
Open your doors and let me in. I hope your favours I shall win. Whether I rise or whether I fall, I'll do my best to please you all. St. George is here and swears he will come in, and if he does, I know he'll pierce my skin. If you will not believe what I do say, let Father Christmas come in. Clear the way.
Retires. Enter Father Christmas.
Here come I, old Father Christmas, welcome or welcome not. I hope old Father Christmas will never be forgot. I am not come here to laugh or to jeer, but for a pocket full of money and a skin full of beer. If you will not believe what I do say, come in the King of Egypt, clear the way.
Enter the King of Egypt.
Here I, the King of Egypt, boldly do appear. St. George, walk in, my only son and heir. Walk in, my son, St. George, and boldly act thy part, that all the people here may see thy wondrous art.
Enter St. George.
All right.
Here come I, St. George from Britain did I spring. I'll fight the dragon bold, my wonders to begin. I'll clip his wings, he shall not fly. I'll cut him down, or else I die.
Enter the dragon.
Who's he that seeks the dragon's blood, and calls so angry and so loud? That English dog, will he before me stand? I'll cut him down with my courageous hand. With my long teeth and scurvy jaw, of such I'd break up half a score, and stay my stomach till I'd more.
Come on then, you big beast.
St. George and the dragon fight.
Roar!
Good Lord, your breath stinks.
Roar!
Oh,
Roar!
oh, ah, hot, 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 hot. Ah, my moustache, my eyebrows. Actually, that looks rather fetching.
Roar!
Right.
Roar! Ah!
The latter is killed.
Is there a doctor to be found already near at hand to cure a deep and deadly wound to make the champion stand?
Enter Doctor.
Oh, yes, there's a doctor to be found, already near at hand, to cure a deep and deadly wound and make the champion stand.
What can you cure?
All sorts of diseases, whatever you pleases, the physic, the palsy, and the gout. If the devil's in, I'll blow him out.
What is your fee?
£15 it is my fee, the money to lay down. But as 'tis such a rogue as thee, I cure for £10. I carry a little bottle of alicampane. Here, Jack, take a little of my flip-flop, pour it down thy tip-top, rise up, and fight again.
The doctor performs his cure. The fight is renewed, and the dragon again is killed.
Here am I, St. George, that worthy champion bold, and with my sword and spear I won 3 crowns of gold. I fought the fiery dragon, and brought him to the slaughter. By that I won fair Sabra, the king of Egypt's daughter. Where is the man that now will me defy? I'll cut his giblets full of holes, and make his buttons fly.
The Turkish knight advances.
Here come I, the Turkish knight, come from the Turkish land to fight. I'll fight St. George, who is my foe. I'll make him yield before I go. He brags to such a high degree, he think there's none can do the like of he.
Where is the Turk that will before me stand? I'll cut him down with my courageous hand.
The fight. The knight is overcome, and falls on one knee.
Oh, pardon me, St. George, pardon of thee I crave. Oh, pardon me this night, and I will be thy slave.
No pardon shalt thou have, while I have foot to stand, so rise thee up again, and fight out sword in hand.
They fight again, and the knight is killed. Father Christmas calls for the doctor, with whom the same dialogue occurs as before, and the cure is performed. Enter the giant Turpin.
Here come I, the giant. Bold Turpin is my name, and all the nations round do tremble at my fame. Where'er I go, they tremble at my sight. No lord or champion long with me would fight.
Here's one that dares to look thee in the face, and soon will send thee to another place. Take that!
Ha 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 ha!
Have at you, sir.
Take that!
You'll have to be quicker than that, sir.
Aha!
Not the face, not the face!
Oh no!
Ha! Ouch!
Ah!
Yeah!
Aha!
Aha! A hit! A palpable hit!
Oh!
Gotcha!
Oh!
Wah!
Oh!
Ha!
Oh! 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 Oh!
And the giant is killed. Medical aid is called in as before, and the cure performed by the doctor, who then, according to the stage direction, is given a basin of gurdy grout, and a kick and driven out.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, your sport is most ended, so prepare for the hat, which is highly commended. The hat it would speak if it had but a tongue. Come throw in your money, and think it no wrong.
Narration read by Esther.
The Dragon, read by Kara Schallenberg.
St. George by Simon Taylor.
Doctor, read by Ezwa.
The King of Egypt, read by Matthew Walton.
Turkish Night, read by Kristen Hughes.
Giant Turpin, read by Betsy Bush.
Father Christmas, read by Henry Fregon.
This giant is in the public domain.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information and to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read and recorded by William Kuhn, September 2006. The Errors of Santa Claus by Stephen Leacock. It was Christmas Eve. The Browns, who lived in the adjoining house, had been dining with the Joneses. Brown and Jones were sitting over wine and walnuts at the table. The others had gone upstairs. "What are you giving to your boy for Christmas?" asked Brown. "A train," said Jones. "New kind of thing, automatic." "Let's have a look at it," said Brown. Jones fetched a parcel from the sideboard and began unwrapping it. "Ingenious thing, isn't it?" he said. "Goes on its own rails. Queer how kids love to play with trains, isn't it?" "Yes," assented Brown. "How are the rails fixed?" "Wait, I'll show you," said Jones. "Just help me to shove these dinner things aside and roll back the cloth. There, see? You lay the rails like that and fasten them at the ends, so." "Oh, yes, I catch on. Makes a grade, doesn't it? Just the thing to amuse a child, isn't it? I got Willie a toy airplane." "I know, they're great. I got Edwin one on his birthday. But I thought I'd get him a train this time. I told him Santa Claus was going to bring him something altogether new this time. Edwin, of course, believes in Santa Claus absolutely. Say, look at this locomotive, would you? It has a spring coiled up inside the firebox." "Wind her up," said Brown, with great interest. "Let's see her go." "All right," said Jones. "Just pile up 2 or 3 plates or something to lean the end of the rails on. There, notice the way it buzzes before it starts. Isn't that a great thing for a kid, eh?" "Yes," said Brown. "And say, see this little string to pull the whistle. By gad, it toots, eh? Just like real." "Now then, Brown," Jones went on, "you hitch on those cars and I'll start her. I'll be engineer, eh?" Half an hour later, Brown and Jones were still playing trains on the dining-room table. But their wives upstairs in the drawing-room hardly noticed their absence. They were too much interested. "Oh, I think it's perfectly sweet," said Mrs. Brown. "Just the loveliest doll I've seen in years. I must get one like it for Ovina. Won't Clarice be perfectly enchanted?" "Yes," answered Mrs. Jones, "and then she'll have all the fun of arranging the dresses. Children love that so much. Look, there are 3 little dresses with the doll. Aren't they cute? All cut out and ready to stitch together." "Oh, how perfectly lovely!" exclaimed Mrs. Brown. "I think the mauve one would suit the doll best, don't you, with such golden hair? Only don't you think it would make it much nicer to turn back the collar, so, and to put a little band, so?" "What a good idea!" said Mrs. Jones. "Do let's try it. Just wait, I'll get a needle in a minute. I'll tell Clarice that Santa Claus sewed it himself. The child believes in Santa Claus absolutely." and half an hour later Mrs. Jones and Mrs. Brown were so busy stitching dolls' clothes that they could not hear the roaring of the little train up and down the dining table, and had no idea what the 4 children were doing. Nor did the children miss their mothers. "Dandy, aren't they?" Edwin Jones was saying to little Willie Brown as they sat in Edwin's bedroom. 100 in a box, with cork tips, and see, an amber mouthpiece that fits into a little case at the side. Good present for Dad, eh? "Fine," said Willie appreciatively. "I'm giving Father cigars." "I know. I thought of cigars, too. Men always like cigars and cigarettes. You can't go wrong on them. Say, would you like to try 1 or 2 of these cigarettes? We can take them from the bottom. You'll like them. They're Russian, away ahead of Egyptian." "Thanks," answered Willie. "I'd like one immensely. I only started smoking last spring, on my 12th birthday. I think a feller's a fool to begin smoking cigarettes too soon, don't you? It stunts him. I waited till I was 12. "Me too," said Edwin, as they lighted their cigarettes. "In fact, I wouldn't buy them now if it weren't for Dad. I simply had to give him something from Santa Claus. He believes in Santa Claus absolutely, you know." And while this was going on, Clarice was showing little Ulvina the absolutely lovely little bridge set that she had got for her mother. "Aren't these markers perfectly charming?" said Ulvina. "And don't you love this little Dutch design? Or is it Flemish, darling?" "Dutch," said Clarice. "Isn't it quaint? And aren't these the dearest little things for putting the money in when you play? I needn't have got them with it. They'd have sold the rest separately. But I think it's too utterly slow playing without money, don't you?" "Oh, abominably!" shuddered Ulvina. "But your mamma never plays for money, does she?" "Mamma? Oh, gracious, no. Mamma's far too slow for that. But I shall tell her that Santa Claus insisted on putting in the little money boxes. I suppose she believes in Santa Claus just as my mamma does." "Oh, absolutely," said Clarice, and added, "What if we play a little game? With a double dummy, the French way, or Norwegian scat, if you like. That only needs 2. "All right," agreed Ulvina. And in a few minutes they were deep in a game of cards with a little pile of pocket money beside them. About half an hour later, all the members of the 2 families were again in the drawing-room. But of course nobody said anything about the presents. In any case, they were all too busy looking at the beautiful big Bible with maps in it that the Joneses had brought to give to Grandfather. They all agreed that, with the help of it, Grandfather could hunt up any place in Palestine in a moment, day or night. But upstairs, away upstairs in a sitting-room of his own, Grandfather Jones was looking with an affectionate eye at the presents that stood beside him. There was a beautiful whiskey decanter, with silver filigree outside and whiskey inside, for Jones, and for the little boy a big nickel-plated Jew's harp. Later on, far in the night, the person, or the influence, or whatever it is called Santa Claus, took all the presents and placed them in the people's stockings. And, being blind as he always has been, he gave the wrong things to the wrong people. In fact, he gave them just as indicated above. But the next day, in the course of Christmas morning, the situation straightened itself out, just as it always does. Indeed, by 10 o'clock, Brown and Jones were playing with the train, and Mrs. Brown and Mrs. Jones were making dolls' clothes, and the boys were smoking cigarettes, and Clarice and Ulvina were playing cards for their pocket money. And upstairs, away up, Grandfather was drinking whiskey and playing the Jew's harp. And so Christmas, just as it always does, turned out all right after all. End of The Errors of Santa Claus by Stephen Leacock.
Esta es una grabación de LibriVox. Todas las grabaciones de LibriVox son del dominio público. Para más información o para contribuir, vaya a LibriVox.org. Leído por Karen Savage. El Evangelio de nuestro Señor Jesucristo según San Lucas, capítulo 2, versos 1 a 20. Y aconteció en aquellos días que salió edicto de parte de Augusto César que toda la tierra fuese empadronada. Este empadronamiento primero fue hecho siendo Cirenio gobernador de la Siria. e iban todos para ser empadronados cada uno a su ciudad. Y subió José de Galilea, de la ciudad de Nazaret, a Judea, a la ciudad de David, que se llama Belén, por cuanto era de la casa y familia de David, para ser empadronado con María su mujer, desposada con él, la cual estaba encinta. Y aconteció que estando ellos allí, se cumplieron los días en que ella había de parir. Y parió a su hijo primogénito, y le envolvió en pañales, y acostóle en un pesebre, porque no había lugar para ellos en el mesón. Y había pastores en la misma tierra que velaban y guardaban las vigilias de la noche sobre su ganado. Y he aquí el ángel del Señor vino sobre ellos, y la claridad de Dios los cercó de resplandor, y tuvieron gran temor. Mas el ángel les dijo: No temáis, porque he aquí os doy nuevas de gran gozo, que será para todo el pueblo, que os ha nacido hoy en la ciudad de David un Salvador, que es Cristo el Señor. Y esto os será por señal: hallaréis al niño envuelto en pañales, echado en un pesebre. Y repentinamente fue con el ángel una multitud de los ejércitos celestiales, que alababan a Dios y decían: Gloria en las alturas a Dios, y en la tierra paz, buena voluntad para con los hombres. Y aconteció que como los ángeles se fueron de ellos al cielo, los pastores dijeron los unos a los otros: Pasemos pues hasta Belén, y veamos esto que ha sucedido, y que el Señor nos ha manifestado. Y vinieron apriesa, y hallaron a María y a José y al niño acostado en el pesebre. Y viéndole hicieron notorio lo que les había sido dicho del niño. Y todos los que oyeron se maravillaron de lo que los pastores les decían. Mas María guardaba todas estas cosas, confiriéndolas en su corazón. Y se volvieron los pastores, glorificando y alabando a Dios de todas las cosas que habían oído y visto, como les había sido dicho. Fin de grabación. Lucas capítulo 2, versos 1 a 20.
The Flight into Egypt, from the Douay-Rheims version of the Bible, Matthew chapter 2, verses 13 through 23. For LibriVox.org, narrated by Sean McKinley. And after they were departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in sleep to Joseph, saying, Arise, and take the child and his mother, and fly into Egypt, and be there until I shall tell thee. For it will come to pass that Herod will seek the child to destroy him. Who arose and took the child and his mother by night, and retired into Egypt, and he was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which the Lord spoke by the prophet, saying, Out of Egypt have I called my son. Then Herod, perceiving that he was deluded by the wise men, was exceeding angry, and sending, killed all the men children that were in Bethlehem, and in all the borders thereof, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. Then was fulfilled that which was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, A voice in Ramah was heard, lamentation and great mourning, Rachel bewailing her children, and would not be comforted, because they are not. But when Herod was dead, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in sleep to Joseph in Egypt, saying, Arise, and take the child and his mother, and go into the land of Israel, for they are dead that sought the life of the child. Who arose and took the child and his mother, and came into the land of Israel. But hearing that Archelaus reigned in Judea in the room of Herod his father, he was afraid to go thither, and being warned in sleep retired into the quarters of Galilee. And coming, he dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled which was said by the prophets, that he shall be called a Nazarene. End of The Flight into Egypt. This recording is in the public domain.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information and to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry. Read for LibriVox.org by Gemma Blythe. $1 and 87 cents, that was all, and 60 cents of it was in pennies. Pennies saved 1 and 2 at a time by bulldozing the grocer and the vegetable man and the butcher, until one's cheeks burned with the silent imputation of parsimony that such close dealing implied. 3 times Della counted it, $1.87, and the next day would be Christmas. There was clearly nothing she could do but flop down on the shabby little couch and howl. So Della did it, which instigates the moral reflection that life is made up of sobs, sniffles, and smiles, with sniffles predominating. While the mistress of the home is gradually subsiding from the first stage to the second, take a look at the home. A furnished flat at $8 per week. It did not exactly beggar description, but it certainly had that word on the lookout for the mendicancy squad. In the vestibule below was a letter-box into which no letter would go, and an electric button from which no mortal finger could coax a ring. Also appertaining thereunto was a card bearing the name Mr. James Dillingham Young. The Dillingham had been flung to the breeze during a former period of prosperity when its possessor was being paid $30 per week. Now, when the income was shrunk to $20, though, they were thinking seriously of contracting to a modest and unassuming D. For whenever Mr. James Dillingham Young came home and reached his flat above, he was called Jim, and greatly hugged by Mrs. James Dillingham Young, already introduced to you as Della, which is all very good. Della finished her cry and attended to her cheeks with the powder rag. She stood by the window and looked out dully at a gray cat walking a gray fence in a gray backyard. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and she had only $1.87 with which to buy Jim a present. She had been saving every penny she could for months, with this result. $20 a week doesn't go far. Expenses had been greater than she had calculated. They always are. Only $1.87 to buy a present for Jim, her Jim. Many a happy hour she had spent planning for something nice for him, something fine and rare and sterling, something just a little bit near to being worthy of the honor of being owned by Jim. There was a pier glass between the windows of the room. Perhaps you have seen a pier glass in an $8 flat. A very thin and very agile person may, by observing his reflection in a rapid sequence of longitudinal strips, obtain a fairly accurate conception of his look. Della, being slender, had mastered the art. Suddenly she whirled from the window and stood before the glass. Her eyes were shining brilliantly, but her face had lost its color within 20 seconds. Rapidly she pulled down her hair and let it fall to its full length. Now there were 2 possessions of the James Dillingham Youngs in which they both took a mighty pride. One was Jim's gold watch that had been his father's and his grandfather's. The other was Della's hair. Had the Queen of Sheba lived in the flat across the air shaft, Della would have let her hair hang out the window some day to try it, just to depreciate Her Majesty's jewels and gifts. Had King Solomon been the janitor, with all his treasures piled up in the basement, Jim would have pulled out his watch every time he passed, just to see him pluck at his beard from envy. And now Della's beautiful hair fell about her rippling and shining like a cascade of brown waters. It reached below her knee and made itself almost a garment for her, and then she did it up again nervously and quickly. Once she faltered for a minute and stood still while a tear or two splashed on the worn red carpet. On went her old brown jacket, on went her old brown hat, with a whirl of skirts and with a brilliant sparkle still in her eyes. She fluttered out the door and down the stairs to the street, where she stopped. The sign read, Madam Sofronie, hair goods of all kinds. One flight up Della ran, and collected herself, panting. Madame, large, too white, chilly, hardly looked the Sofronie. Will you buy my hair? Asked Della. I buy hair, said Madame. Take your hat off, and let's have a sight at the looks of it. Down rippled the brown cascade. $20, said Madame, lifting the mass with a practised hand. Give it to me quick, said Della. Oh, and the next 2 hours tripped by on rosy wings. Forget the hashed metaphor. She was ransacking the stores for Jim's present. She found it at last. It surely had been made for Jim and no one else. There was no other like it in any of the stores, and she had turned all of them inside out. It was a platinum fob chain, simple and chaste in design, properly proclaiming its value by substance alone, and not by meretricious ornamentation, as all good things should do. It was even worthy of the watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew that it must be Jim's. It was like him. Quietness and value, the description applied to both. $21 they took from her for it, and she hurried home with the 87 cents. With that chain on his watch, Jim might be properly anxious about the time in any company. Grand as the watch was, he sometimes looked at it on the sly, on account of the old leather strap that he used in place of a chain. When Della reached home, her intoxication gave way a little to prudence and reason. She got out her curling irons and lighted the gas, and went to work repairing the ravages made by generosity added to love, which is always a tremendous task, dear friends, a mammoth task. Within 40 minutes her head was covered with tiny, close-lying curls that made her look wonderfully like a truant schoolboy. She looked at her reflection in the mirror long, carefully, and critically. "If Jim doesn't kill me," she said to herself, "before he takes a second look at me, he'll say I look like a Coney Island chorus girl. But what could I do? Oh, what could I do with $1.87? At 7 o'clock the coffee was made and the frying pan was on the back of the stove, hot and ready to cook the chops. Jim was never late. Della doubled the fob chain in her hand and sat on the corner of the table, near the door that he always entered. Then she heard his step on the stair, away down on the first flight, and she turned white for just a moment. She had a habit of saying a little silent prayer about the simplest everyday things, and now she whispered, "Please, God, make him think I am still pretty." The door opened, and Jim stepped in and closed it. He looked thin and very serious. Poor fellow, he was only 22, and to be burdened with a family! He needed a new overcoat, and he was without gloves. Jim stopped inside the door, as immovable as a setter at the scent quail. His eyes were fixed upon Della, and there was an expression in them that she could not read, and it terrified her. It was not anger, nor surprise, nor disapproval, nor horror, nor any of the sentiments that she had been prepared for. He simply stared at her fixedly, with that peculiar expression on his face. Della wriggled off the table and went for him. "Jim, darling," she cried, "don't look at me that way. I had my hair cut off and sold because I couldn't have lived through Christmas without giving you a present. It'll grow out again. You won't mind, will you? I just had to do it. My hair grows awfully fast. Say Merry Christmas, Jim, and let's be happy. You don't know what a beautiful nice gift I've got for you." "You've cut off your hair?" asked Jim, laboriously, as if he had not arrived at that patent fact yet even after the hardest mental labor. "Cut it off and sold it," said Della. "Don't you like me just as well, anyhow? I'm me without my hair, ain't I?" Jim looked about the room curiously. "You say your hair is gone?" he said, with an air almost of idiocy. "You needn't look for it," said Della. "It's sold. I tell you, sold and gone, too. It's Christmas Eve, boy. Be good to me, for I went for you. Maybe the hairs on my head were numbered," she went on with sudden serious sweetness, "but nobody could ever count my love for you. Shall I put the chops on, Jim?" Out of his trance, Jim seemed quickly to wake. He enfolded his Della. For 10 seconds let us regard with discreet scrutiny some inconsequential object in the other direction. $8 a week, or $1,000,000 a year. What is the difference? A mathematician or a wit would give you the wrong answer. The Magi brought valuable gifts, but that was not among them. This dark assertion will be illuminated later on. Jim drew a package from his overcoat pocket and threw it upon the table. "Don't make any mistake, Dell," he said, "about me. I don't think there's anything in the way of a haircut or a shave or a shampoo that can make me like my girl any less. But if you'll unwrap that package, you may see why you had me going a while at first." Wide fingers and nimble tore at the string and paper. and then an ecstatic scream of joy, and then, alas, a quick feminine change to hysterical tears and wails, necessitating the immediate employment of all the comforting powers of the lord of the flat, for there lay the combs, the set of combs, side and back, Della had worshipped long in a Broadway window. Beautiful combs, pure tortoise shell, with jeweled rims, just the shade to wear in the beautiful vanished hair. They were expensive combs, she knew, and her heart had simply craved and yearned over them without the least hope of possession. And now they were hers, but the dresses that should have adorned the coveted adornments were gone. But she hugged them to her bosom, and at length she was able to look up with dim eyes and a smile and say, "My hair grows so fast, Jim." And then Della leaped up like a little singed cat and cried, "Oh!" Jim had not yet seen his beautiful present. She held it out to him eagerly upon her open palm. The dull precious metal seemed to flash with a reflection of her bright and ardent spirit. "Isn't it a dandy, Jim? I hunted all over town to find it. You'll have to look at the time 100 times a day now. Give me your watch. I want to see how it looks on it." Instead of obeying, Jim tumbled down on the couch and put his hands under the back of his head and smiled. "Dale," said he, "let's put our Christmas presents away and keep 'em a while. They're too nice to use just at present. I sold the watch to get the money to buy your combs, and now suppose you put the chops on." The Magi, as you know, were wise men, wonderfully wise men, who brought gifts to the babe in the manger. They invented the art of giving Christmas presents. Being wise, their gifts were no doubt wise ones, possibly bearing the privilege of exchange in case of duplication. And here I have lamely related to you the uneventful chronicle of two foolish children in a flat who most unwisely sacrificed for each other the greatest treasures of their house. But in the last word to the wise of these days, let it be said that of all who give gifts, these two were the wisest. Of all who give and receive gifts, such as they are wisest. Everywhere they are wisest. They are the Magi. End of story. This recording is in the public domain.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Narrated by Sean McKinley. The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry. $1.87. That was all, and 60 cents of it was in pennies. Pennies saved 1 and 2 at a time by bulldozing the grocer and the vegetable man and the butcher, until one's cheeks burned with the silent imputation of parsimony that such close dealing implied. 3 times Della counted it, $1.87, and the next day would be Christmas. There was clearly nothing to do but flop down on the shabby little couch and howl. So Della did it. Which instigates the moral reflection that life is made up of sobs, sniffles, and smiles, with sniffles predominating. While the mistress of the home is gradually subsiding from the first stage to the second, take a look at the home. A furnished flat at $8 per week. It did not exactly beggar description, but it certainly had that word on the lookout for the mendicancy squad. In the vestibule below was a letter box into which no letter would go, and an electric button from which no mortal finger could coax a ring. Also, appertaining thereunto was a card bearing the name Mr. James Dillingham Young. The Dillingham had been flung to the breeze during a former period of prosperity when its possessor was being paid $30 per week. Now, when the income was shrunk to $20, though they were thinking seriously of contracting to a modest and unassuming D. But whenever Mr. James Dillingham Young came home and reached his flat above, he was called Jim, and greatly hugged by Mrs. James Dillingham Young, already introduced to you as Della, which is all very good. Della finished her cry, and attended to her cheeks with the powder rag. She stood by the window, and looked out dully at a grey cat walking a grey fence in a grey backyard. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and she had only $1.87 with which to buy Jim a present. She had been saving every penny she could for months, with this result. $20 a week doesn't go very far. Expenses had been greater than she had calculated. They always were. Only $1.87 to buy a present for Jim. Her Jim. Many a happy hour she had spent planning for something nice for him. Something fine and rare and sterling. Something just a little bit near to being worthy of the honor of being owned by Jim. There was a pier glass between the window of the room. Perhaps you have seen a pier glass in an $8 flat. A very thin and very agile person may, by observing his reflection in a rapid sequence of longitudinal strips, obtain a fairly accurate conception of his looks. Della, being slender, had mastered the art. Suddenly she whirled from the window and stood before the glass. Her eyes were shining brilliantly, but her face had lost its color within 20 seconds. Rapidly she pulled down her hair and let it fall to its length. Now, there were two possessions of the James Dillingham Youngs in which they both took a mighty pride. One was Jim's gold watch that had been his father's and his grandfather's. The other was Della's hair. Had the Queen of Sheba lived in the flat across the air shaft, Della would have let her hair hang out the window some day to dry, just to depreciate Her Majesty's jewels and gifts. Had King Solomon been the janitor, with all his treasures piled up in the basement, Jim would have pulled out his watch every time he passed, just to see him pluck at his beard from envy. So now Della's beautiful hair fell about her, rippling and shining like a cascade of brown waters. It reached below her knee, and made itself almost a garment for her. And then she did it up again, nervously and quickly. Once she faltered for a minute, and stood still, while a tear or two splashed on the worn red carpet. On went her old brown jacket, on went her old brown hat. With a whirl of skirts, and with the brilliant sparkle still in her eye, she fluttered out the door and down the stairs to the street. Where she stopped, the sign read, Madame Sofronie, hair goods of all kinds. One flight up, Della ran, and collected herself, panting. Madame, large, too white, chilly, hardly looked the Sofronie. Will you buy my hair? asked Della. I buy hair, said Madame. Take your hat off and let's have a look at the looks of it. Down rippled the brown cascade. $20, said Madame, lifting the mass with a practised hand. Give it to me quick, said Della. Oh, and the next 2 hours tripped by on rosy wings. Forget the hashed metaphor. She was ransacking the stores for Jim's present. She found it at last. It surely had been made for Jim, and no one else. There was no other like it in any of the stores, and she had turned all of them inside out. It was a platinum fob chain, simple and chaste in design, properly proclaiming its value by substance alone, and not by meretricious ornamentation, as all good things should do. It was even worthy of the watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew that it must be Jim's. It was like him. Quietness and value. The description applied to both. $21 they took from her for it, and she hurried home with the 87 cents. With that chain on his watch, Jim might be properly anxious about the time in any company. Grand as the watch was, he sometimes looked at it on the sly, on account of the old leather strap that he used in place of a chain. When Della reached home, her intoxication gave way a little to prudence and reason. She got out her curling irons and lighted the gas, and went to work repairing the ravages made by generosity added to love, which is always a tremendous task, dear friends, a mammoth task. Within 40 minutes her head was covered with tiny, close-lying curls that made her look wonderfully like a truant schoolboy. She looked at her reflection in the mirror long, carefully, and critically. "If Jim doesn't kill me," she said to herself, "before he takes a second look at me, he'll say I look like a Coney Island chorus girl. But what could I do? Oh, what could I do with $1.87? At 7 o'clock the coffee was made, and the frying pan was on the back of the stove, hot and ready to cook the chops. Jim was never late. Della doubled the fob chain in her hand and sat on the corner of the table near the door that he always entered. Then she heard his step on the stair, away down on the first flight, and she turned white for just a moment. She had a habit of saying a little silent prayer about the simplest everyday things, and now she whispered, "Please, God, make him think I am still pretty." The door opened, and Jim stepped in and closed it. He looked thin and very serious. Poor fellow, he was only 22, and to be burdened with a family. He needed a new overcoat, and he was without gloves. Jim stopped inside the door, as immovable as a setter at the scent of a quail. His eyes were fixed upon Della, and there was an expression in them that she could not read, and it terrified her. It was not anger, nor surprise, nor disapproval, nor horror, nor any of the sentiments that she had been prepared for. He simply stared at her fixedly with that peculiar expression on his face. Della wriggled off the table and went for him. "Jim, darling," she cried, "don't look at me that way. I had my hair cut off and sold because I couldn't have lived through Christmas without giving you a present. It'll grow out again. You won't mind, will you? I just had to do it. My hair grows awfully fast. Say Merry Christmas, Jim, and let's be happy. You don't know what a beautiful, nice gift I've got for you." "You've cut off your hair?" asked Jim, laboriously, as if he had not arrived at that patent fact yet, even after the hardest mental labor. "Cut it off and sold it," said Della. "Don't you like me just as well, anyhow? I'm me without my hair, ain't I?" Jim looked about the room curiously. "You say your hair's gone," he said, with an air almost of idiocy. "You needn't look for it," said Della. "It's sold, I tell you, sold and gone, too. It's Christmas Eve, boy. Be good to me, for it went for you. Maybe the hairs of my head were numbered," she went on with sudden serious sweetness. "But nobody could ever count my love for you. Shall I put the chops on, Jim?" Out of his trance, Jim seemed quickly to wake. He enfolded his Della. For 10 seconds let us regard with discreet scrutiny some inconsequential object in the other direction. $8 a week or $1,000,000 a year. What is the difference? A mathematician or a wit would give you the wrong answer. The Magi brought valuable gifts, but that was not among them. This dark assertion will be illuminated later on. Jim drew a package from his overcoat pocket and threw it upon the table. "Don't make any mistake, Dell," he said, "about me. I don't think there's anything in the way of a haircut, or a shave, or a shampoo that could make me like my girl any less. But if you'll unwrap that package, you may see why you had me going a while at first." White fingers and nimble tore at the string and paper, and then an ecstatic scream of joy, and then, alas! a quick feminine change to hysterical tears and wails, necessitating the immediate employment of all the comforting powers of the lord of that flat. For there lay the combs, the set of combs, side and back, that Della had worshipped long in a Broadway window. Beautiful combs, pure tortoiseshell, with jeweled rims, just the shade to wear in the beautiful vanished hair. They were expensive combs, she knew, and her heart had simply craved and yearned over them without the least hope of possession. And now they were hers. But the tresses that should have adorned the coveted adornments were gone. But she hugged them to her bosom, and at length she was able to look up with dim eyes and a smile and say, "My hair grows so fast, Jim." And then Della leaped up like a little singed cat and cried, "Oh, oh!" Jim had not yet seen his beautiful present. She held it out to him eagerly upon her open palm. The dull, precious metal seemed to flash with a reflection of her bright and ardent spirit. "Isn't it a dandy, Jim? I hunted all over town to find it. You'll have to look at the time 100 times a day now. Give me your watch. I want to see how it looks on it." Instead of obeying, Jim tumbled down on the couch and put his hands under the back of his head and smiled. "Dell," he said, "let's put our Christmas presents away and keep 'em a while. They're too nice to use just at present. I sold the watch to get the money to buy your combs. And now, suppose you put the chops on." The Magi, as you know, were wise men, wonderfully wise men, who brought gifts to the babe in the manger. They invented the art of giving Christmas presents. Being wise, their gifts were no doubt wise ones, possibly bearing the privilege of exchange in a case of duplication. And here I have lamely related to you the uneventful chronicle of two foolish children in a flat who most unwisely sacrificed for each other the greatest treasures of their house. But in a last word to the wise of these days, let it be said that of all who give gifts, these two were the wisest. Of all who give and receive gifts, such as they are wisest. Everywhere they are wisest. They are the Magi. End of The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, and to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Hoodoo McFiggin's Christmas by Stephen Leacock. This reading is by Dave Ranson. This Santa Claus business is played out. It's a sneaking underhand method, and the sooner it's exposed, the better. For a parent to get up under cover of the darkness of night and palm off a 10-cent necktie on a boy who had been expecting a $10 watch and then say that an angel sent it to him is low. Undeniably low. I had a good opportunity of observing how the thing worked this Christmas, in the case of young Hoodoo McFiggin, the son and heir of the McFiggins, at whose house I board. Hoodoo McFiggin is a good boy, a religious boy. He had been given to understand that Santa Claus would bring nothing to his father and mother because grown-up people don't get presents from the angels. So he saved up all his pocket money and bought a box of cigars for his father and a 75-cent diamond brooch for his mother. His own fortunes he left in the hands of the angels. But he prayed. He prayed every night for weeks that Santa Claus would bring him a pair of skates and a puppy dog and an air gun and a bicycle and a Noah's Ark and a sleigh and a drum. Altogether about $150 worth of stuff. I went into Hoodoo's room quite early Christmas morning. I had an idea that the scene would be interesting. I woke him up and he sat up in bed, his eyes glistening with radiant expectation, and began hauling things out of his stocking. The first parcel was bulky. It was done up quite loosely and had an odd look generally. "Ha ha!" Hoodoo cried gleefully as he began undoing it. "I'll bet it's the puppy dog all wrapped up in paper." And was it the puppy dog? No, by no means. It was a pair of nice strong No. 4 boots, laces and all, labeled Hoodoo from Santa Claus, and underneath Santa Claus had written 95 net. The boy's jaw fell with delight. "It's boots," he said, and plunged in his hand again. He began hauling away at another parcel with renewed hope on his face. This time the thing seemed like a little round box. Hoodoo tore the paper off it with a feverish hand. He shook it. Something rattled inside. "It's a watch and chain! It's a watch and chain!" he shouted. Then he pulled the lid off. And was it a watch and chain? No. It was a box of nice brand new celluloid collars, a dozen of them, all alike, and all his own size. The boy was so pleased that you could see his face crack up with pleasure. He waited a few minutes until his intense joy subsided. Then he tried again. This time the packet was long and hard. It resisted the touch and had a sort of funnel shape. "It's a toy pistol," said the boy, trembling with excitement. "Gee, I hope there are lots of caps with it. I'll fire some off now and wake up Father." "No, my poor child, you will not wake your father with that. It is a useful thing, but it needs not caps, and it fires no bullets, and you cannot wake a sleeping man with a toothbrush." Yes, it was a toothbrush, a regular beauty, pure bone all through, and ticketed with a little paper, "Hoodoo from Santa Claus." Again the expression of intense joy passed over the boy's face, and the tears of gratitude started from his eyes. He wiped them away with his toothbrush and passed on. The next packet was much larger and evidently contained something soft and bulky. It had been too long to go into the stocking and was tied outside. "I wonder what this is," Hoodoo mused, half afraid to open it. Then his heart gave a great leap and he forgot all his other presents in the anticipation of this one. "It's the drum," he gasped. "It's the drum, all wrapped up." Drum nothing. It was pants. A pair of the nicest little short pants. Yellowish-brown short pants, with dear little stripes of color running across both ways, and here again Santa Claus had written, "Hoodoo from Santa Claus, 1 fort net." But there was something wrapped up in it. Oh yes, there was a pair of braces wrapped up in it. Braces with a little steel sliding thing so that you could slide your pants up to your neck if you wanted to. The boy gave a dry sob of satisfaction. Then he took out his last present. "It's a book," he said as he unwrapped it. "I wonder if it is fairy stories or adventures. Oh, I hope it's adventures. I'll read it all morning." No, Hoodoo, it was not precisely adventures. It was a small family Bible. Hoodoo had now seen all his presents, and he arose and dressed. But he still had the fun of playing with his toys. That is always the chief delight of Christmas morning. First he played with his toothbrush. He got a whole lot of water and brushed all his teeth with it. This was huge. Then he played with his collars. He had no end of fun with them, taking them all out one by one and swearing at them, and then putting them back and swearing at the whole lot together. The next toy was his pants. He had immense fun there, putting them on and taking them off again, and then trying to guess which side was which by merely looking at them. After that he took his book and read some adventures called Genesis till breakfast time. Then he went downstairs and kissed his father and mother. His father was smoking a cigar, and his mother had her new brooch on. Hoodoo's face was thoughtful, and a light seemed to have broken in upon his mind. Indeed, I think it altogether likely that next Christmas he will hang on to his own money and take chances on what the angels bring. End of Hoodoo McFiggin's Christmas by Stephen Leacock.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. A Kidnapped Santa Claus by L. Frank Baum. Santa Claus lives in the Laughing Valley, where stands the big rambling castle in which his toys are manufactured. His workmen, selected from the ryls, knooks, pixies, and fairies, live with him, and everyone is as busy as can be from one year's end to another. It is called the Laughing Valley because everything there is happy and gay. The brook chuckles to itself as it leaps frolicking between its green banks. The wind whistles merrily in the trees, the sunbeams dance lightly over the soft grass, and the violets and wild flowers look smilingly up from their green nests. To laugh one needs to be happy one needs to be content, and throughout the Laughing Valley of Santa Claus contentment reigns supreme. On one side is the mighty forest of Burzee. At the other side stands the huge mountain that contains the caves of the demons, and between them the valley lies smiling and peaceful. One would think that our good old Santa Claus, who devotes his days to making children happy, would have no enemies on all the earth, and, as a matter of fact, for a long period of time he encountered nothing but love wherever he might go. But the demons who live in the mountain caves grew to hate Santa Claus very much, and all for the simple reason that he made children happy. The caves of the demons are 5 in number. A broad pathway leads up to the first cave, which is a finely arched cavern at the foot of the mountain, the entrance being beautifully carved and decorated. In it resides the Demon of Selfishness. Back of this is another cavern inhabited by the Demon of Envy. The cave of the Demon of Hatred is next in order, and through this one passes to the home of the Demon of Malice, situated in a dark and fearful cave in the very heart of the mountain. I do not know what lies beyond this. Some say there are terrible pitfalls leading to death and destruction, and this may well be true. However, from each one of the 4 caves mentioned, there is a small, narrow tunnel leading to the 5th cave, a cozy little room occupied by the Demon of Repentance. And as the rocky floors of these passages are well worn by the track of passing feet, I judge that many wanderers in the caves of the demons have escaped through the tunnels to the abode of the Demon of Repentance, who is said to be a pleasant sort of fellow, who gladly opens for one a little door, admitting you into fresh air and sunshine again. Well, these demons of the caves, thinking they had great cause to dislike old Santa Claus, held a meeting one day to discuss the matter. "I'm really getting lonesome," said the Demon of Selfishness, "for Santa Claus distributes so many pretty Christmas gifts to all the children that they become happy and generous through his example and keep away from my cave." "I'm having the same trouble," rejoined the Demon of Envy. "The little ones seem quite content with Santa Claus, and there are few indeed that I can coax to become envious." "And that makes it bad for me," declared the Demon of Hatred, "for if no children pass through the caves of Selfishness and Envy, none can get to my cavern." "Or to mine," added the Demon of Malice. "For my part," said the Demon of Repentance, "it is easily seen that if children do not visit your caves they have no need to visit mine, so that I am quite as neglected as you are." "And all because of this person they call Santa Claus!" exclaimed the Demon of Envy. "He is simply ruining our business, and something must be done at once." To this they readily agreed, but what to do was another and more difficult matter to settle. They knew that Santa Claus worked all through the year at his castle in the Laughing Valley, preparing the gifts he was to distribute on Christmas Eve, and at first they resolved to try to tempt him into their caves, that they might lead him on to the terrible pitfalls that ended in destruction. So the very next day, while Santa Claus was busily at work surrounded by his little band of assistants, the Demon of Selfishness came to him and said: "These toys are wonderfully bright and pretty. Why do you not keep them for yourself? It's a pity to give them to those noisy boys and fretful girls, who break and destroy them so quickly." "Nonsense!" cried the old graybeard, his bright eyes twinkling merrily as he turned toward the tempting demon. "The boys and girls are never so noisy and fretful after receiving my presents, and if I can make them happy for one day in the year I am quite content." So the Demon went back to the others, who awaited him in their caves, and said: "I have failed, for Santa Claus is not at all selfish." The following day the Demon of Envy visited Santa Claus. Said he: "The toy shops are full of playthings quite as pretty as those you are making. What a shame it is that they should interfere with your business! They make toys by machinery much quicker than you can make them by hand, and they sell them for money, while you get nothing at all for your work." But Santa Claus refused to be envious of the toy shops. "I can supply the little ones but once a year, on Christmas Eve," he answered, "for the children are many and I am but one. And as my work is one of love and kindness, I would be ashamed to receive money for my little gifts. But throughout all the year the children must be amused in some way, and so the toy shops are able to bring much happiness to my little friends. I like the toy shops, and am glad to see them prosper." In spite of the second rebuff, the Demon of Hatred thought he would try to influence Santa Claus. So the next day he entered the busy workshop and said: "Good morning, Santa. I have bad news for you." "Then run away like a good fellow," answered Santa Claus. "Bad news is something that should be kept secret and never told." "You cannot escape this, however," declared the Demon, "for in the world are a good many who do not believe in Santa Claus, and these you are bound to hate bitterly, since they have so wronged you." "Stuff and rubbish!" cried Santa. "And there are others who resent your making children happy, and who sneer at you and call you a foolish old rattle-pate. You are quite right to hate such base slanderers, and you ought to be revenged upon them for their evil words." "But I don't hate 'em!" exclaimed Santa Claus positively. "Such people do me no real harm, but merely render themselves and their children unhappy. Poor things! I'd much rather help them any day than injure them." Indeed, the Demons could not tempt old Santa Claus in any way. On the contrary, he was shrewd enough to see that their object in visiting him was to make mischief and trouble, and his cheery laughter disconcerted the evil ones and showed to them the folly of such an undertaking, so they abandoned honeyed words and determined to use force. It was well known that no harm can come to Santa Claus while he is in the Laughing Valley, for the fairies and Ryls and Knooks all protect him. But on Christmas Eve he drives his reindeer out into the big world, carrying a sleighload of toys and pretty gifts to the children, and this was the time and the occasion when his enemies had the best chance to injure him. So the Demons laid their plans and awaited the arrival of Christmas Eve. The moon shone big and white in the sky, and the snow lay crisp and sparkling on the ground as Santa Claus cracked his whip and sped away out of the valley into the great world beyond. The roomy sleigh was packed full with huge sacks of toys, and as the reindeer dashed onward, our jolly old Santa laughed and whistled and sang for very joy. For in all his merry life this was the one day in the year when he was happiest, the day he lovingly bestowed the treasures of his workshop upon the little children. It would be a busy night for him, he well knew. As he whistled and shouted and cracked his whip again, he reviewed in mind all the towns and cities and farmhouses where he was expected, and figured that he had just enough presents to go around and make every child happy. The reindeer knew exactly what was expected of them, and dashed along so swiftly that their feet scarcely seemed to touch the snow-covered ground. Suddenly a strange thing happened. A rope shot through the moonlight, and a big noose that was in the end of it settled over the arms and body of Santa Claus and drew tight. Before he could resist or even cry out, he was jerked from the seat of the sleigh and tumbled head foremost into a snowbank, while the reindeer rushed onward with the load of toys and carried it quickly out of sight and sound. Such a surprising experience confused old Santa for a moment, and when he had collected his senses he found that the wicked demons had pulled him from the snowdrift and bound him tightly with many coils of the stout rope, and then they carried the kidnapped Santa Claus away to their mountain, where they thrust the prisoner into a secret cave and chained him to the rocky wall so that he could not escape. "Ha ha!" laughed the demons, rubbing their hands together with cruel glee. "What will the children do now? How they will cry and scold and storm when they find there are no toys in their stockings and no gifts on their Christmas trees! And what a lot of punishment they will receive from their parents! And how they will flock to our caves of selfishness and envy and hatred and malice! We have done a mighty clever thing, we demons of the caves." Now it so chanced that on this Christmas Eve the good Santa Claus had taken with him in his sleigh Nutter the Ryl, Peter the Knook, Kilter the Pixie, and a small fairy named Whisk, his 4 favorite assistants. These little people he had often found very useful in helping him to distribute his gifts to the children, and when their master was so suddenly dragged from the sleigh they were all snugly tucked underneath the seat, where the sharp wind could not reach them. The tiny immortals knew nothing of the capture of Santa Claus until some time after he had disappeared, but finally they missed his cheery voice, and as their master always sang or whistled on his journeys, the silence warned them that something was wrong. Little Wisk stuck out his head from underneath the seat and found Santa Claus gone and no one to direct the flight of the reindeer. "Whoa!" he called out, and the deer obediently slackened speed and came to a halt. Peter and Nutter and Kilter all jumped upon the seat and looked back over the track made by the sleigh, but Santa Claus had been left miles and miles behind. "What shall we do?" asked Wisk anxiously, all the mirth and mischief banished from his wee face by this great calamity. "We must go back at once and find our master," said Nutter the Ryl, who thought and spoke with much deliberation. "No, no!" exclaimed Peter the Knook, who, cross and crabbed though he was, might always be depended upon in an emergency. "If we delay or go back, there will not be time to get the toys to the children before morning, and that would grieve Santa Claus more than anything else." "It is certain that some wicked creatures have captured him," added Kilter thoughtfully, "and their object must be to make the children unhappy. So our first duty is to get the toys distributed as carefully as if Santa Claus were himself present. Afterward we can search for our master and easily secure his freedom." This seemed such good and sensible advice that the others at once resolved to adopt it. So Peter the Knook called to the reindeer, and the faithful animals again sprang forward and dashed over hill and valley, through forest and plain, until they came to the houses wherein children lay sleeping and dreaming of the pretty gifts they would find on Christmas morning. The little immortals had set themselves a difficult task, for although they had assisted Santa Claus on many of his journeys, their master had always directed and guided them and told them exactly what he wished them to do. But now they had to distribute the toys according to their own judgment, and they did not understand children as well as did old Santa, so it is no wonder they made some laughable errors. Mamie Brown, who wanted a doll, got a drum instead, and a drum is of no use to a girl who loves dolls. And Charlie Smith, who delights to romp and play out of doors and who wanted some new rubber boots to keep his feet dry, received a sewing box filled with colored worsteds and threads and needles, which made him so provoked that he thoughtlessly called our dear Santa Claus a fraud. Had there been many such mistakes, the demons would have accomplished their evil purpose and made the children unhappy. But the little friends of the absent Santa Claus labored faithfully and intelligently to carry out their master's ideas, and they made fewer errors than might be expected under such unusual circumstances. And although they worked as swiftly as possible, day had begun to break before the toys and other presents were all distributed. So for the first time in many years the reindeer trotted into the Laughing Valley on their return in broad daylight, with the brilliant sun peeping over the edge of the forest to prove they were far behind their accustomed hours. Having put the deer in the stable, the little folk began to wonder how they might rescue their master, and they realized they must discover, first of all, what had happened to him and where he was. So Whisk the Fairy transported himself to the bower of the Fairy Queen, which was located deep in the heart of the Forest of Burzee, and once there, it did not take him long to find out all about the naughty demons and how they had kidnapped the good Santa Claus to prevent his making children happy. The Fairy Queen also promised her assistance, and then, fortified by this powerful support, Whisk flew back to where Nutter and Peter and Kilter awaited him, and the four counseled together and laid plans to rescue their master from his enemies. It is possible that Santa Claus was not as merry as usual during the night that succeeded his capture, for although he had faith in the judgment of his little friends, he could not avoid a certain amount of worry, and an anxious look would creep at times into his kind old eyes as he thought of the disappointment that might await his dear little children. And the demons who guarded him by turns, one after another, did not neglect to taunt him with contemptuous words in his helpless condition. When Christmas Day dawned, the Demon of Malice was guarding the prisoner, and his tongue was sharper than any of the others. "The children are waking up, Santa!" he cried. "They are waking up to find their stockings empty. Ho, ho! How they will quarrel and wail and stamp their feet in anger! Our caves will be full today, old Santa. Our caves are sure to be full." But to this, as to other like taunts, Santa Claus answered nothing. He was much grieved by his capture, it is true, but his courage did not forsake him, and finding that the prisoner would not reply to his jeers, the Demon of Malice presently went away and sent the Demon of Repentance to take his place. This last personage was not so disagreeable as the others. He had gentle and refined features, and his voice was soft and pleasant in tone. "My brother demons do not trust me overmuch," said he as he entered the cavern, "but it is morning now, and the mischief is done. You cannot visit the children again for another year." "That is true," answered Santa Claus almost cheerfully. "Christmas Eve is past, and for the first time in centuries I have not visited my children." "The little ones will be greatly disappointed," murmured the Demon of Repentance almost regretfully. "But that cannot be helped now. Their grief is likely to make the children selfish and envious and hateful, and if they come to the Cave of the Demons today, I shall get a chance to lead some of them to my Cave of Repentance." "Do you never repent yourself?" asked Santa Claus curiously. "Oh, yes, indeed," answered the Demon. "I am even now repenting that I assisted in your capture. Of course, it is too late to remedy the evil that has been done, but repentance, you know, can only come after an evil thought or deed, for in the beginning there is nothing to repent of." "So I understand," said Santa Claus. "Those who avoid evil need never visit your cave." "As a rule, that is true," replied the Demon. "Yet you, who have done no evil, are about to visit my cave at once, for to prove that I sincerely regret my share in your capture I am going to permit you to escape." This speech greatly surprised the prisoner until he reflected that it was just what might be expected of the Demon of Repentance. The fellow at once busied himself untying the knots that bound Santa Claus and unlocking the chains that fastened him to the wall. Then he led the way through a long tunnel until they both emerged in the Cave of Repentance. "I hope you will forgive me," said the Demon, pleadingly. "I am not really a bad person, you know, and I believe I accomplish a great deal of good in the world." With this he opened a back door that let in a flood of sunshine, and Santa Claus sniffed the fresh air gratefully. "I bear no malice," said he to the Demon in a gentle voice, "and I am sure the world would be a dreary place without you. So good morning, and a Merry Christmas to you." With these words he stepped out to greet the bright morning, and a moment later he was trudging along, whistling softly to himself, on his way to his home in the Laughing Valley. Marching over the snow toward the mountain was a vast army made of the most curious creatures imaginable. There were numberless Knooks from the forest, as rough and crooked in appearance as the gnarled branches of the trees they ministered to, and there were dainty Ryls from the fields, each one bearing the emblem of the flower or plant it guarded. Behind these were many ranks of pixies, gnomes, and nymphs, and in the rear 1,000 beautiful fairies floated along in gorgeous array. This wonderful army was led by Whisk, Peter, Nutter, and Kilter, who had assembled it to rescue Santa Claus from captivity and to punish the demons who had dared to take him away from his beloved children. And although they looked so bright and peaceful, the little immortals were armed with powers that would be very terrible to those who had incurred their anger. Woe to the demons of the caves if this mighty army of vengeance ever met them! But lo, coming to meet his loyal friends appeared the imposing form of Santa Claus, his white beard floating in the breeze and his bright eyes sparkling with pleasure at this proof of the love and veneration he had inspired in the hearts of the most powerful creatures in existence. And while they clustered around him and danced with glee at his safe return, he gave them earnest thanks for their support. But Whisk and Nutter and Peter and Kilter he embraced affectionately. "It is useless to pursue the demons," said Santa Claus to the army. "They have their place in the world and can never be destroyed. But that is a great pity, nevertheless," he continued musingly. So the fairies and Knooks and Pixies and Ryls all escorted the good man to his castle, and there left him to talk over the events of the night with his little assistants. Whisk had already rendered himself invisible and flown through the big world to see how the children were getting along on this bright Christmas morning, and by the time he returned Peter had finished telling Santa Claus of how they had distributed the toys. "We really did very well," cried the fairy in a pleased voice, "for I found little unhappiness among the children this morning. Still, you must not get captured again, my dear master, for we might not be so fortunate another time in carrying out your ideas." He then related the mistakes that had been made, and which he had not discovered until his tour of inspection. And Santa Claus at once sent him with rubber boots for Charlie Smith and a doll for Mamie Brown, so that even those two disappointed ones became happy. As for the wicked demons of the caves, they were filled with anger and chagrin when they found that their clever capture of Santa Claus had come to naught. Indeed, no one on that Christmas day appeared to be at all selfish or envious or hateful. And realizing that while the children's saint had so many powerful friends it was folly to oppose him, the demons never again attempted to interfere with his journeys on Christmas Eve. End of A Kidnapped Santa Claus. Recorded by Judy Bieber, August 2006. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Little Bun Rabbit, from Mother Goose in Prose, by L. Frank Baum. Oh, little Bun Rabbit, so soft and so shy, say, what do you see with your big round eye? On Christmas we rabbits, says Bunny so shy, keep watch to see Santa go galloping by. Little Dorothy had passed all the few years of her life in the country, and being the only child upon the farm, she was allowed to roam about the meadows and woods as she pleased. On the bright summer mornings Dorothy's mother would tie a sunbonnet under the girl's chin, and then she romped away to the fields to amuse herself in her own way. She came to know every flower that grew and to call them by name, and she always stepped very carefully to avoid treading on them, for Dorothy was a kind-hearted child and did not like to crush the pretty flowers that bloomed in her path. And she was also very fond of all the animals, and learned to know them well, and even to understand their language, which very few people can do. And the animals loved Dorothy in turn, for the word passed around amongst them that she could be trusted to do them no harm. For the horse, whose soft nose Dorothy often gently stroked, told the cow of her kindness, and the cow told the dog, and the dog told the cat, and the cat told her black kitten, and the black kitten told the rabbit when one day they met in the turnip patch. Therefore, when the rabbit, which is the most timid of all animals and the most difficult to get acquainted with, looked out of a small bush at the edge of the wood one day and saw Dorothy standing a little way off, he did not scamper away as is his custom, but sat very still and met the gaze of her sweet eyes boldly, although perhaps his heart beat a little faster than usual. Dorothy herself was afraid she might frighten him away, so she kept very quiet for a time, leaning silently against a tree and smiling encouragement at her timorous companion, until the rabbit became reassured and blinked his big eyes at her thoughtfully. For he was as much interested in the little girl as she in him, since it was the first time he had dared to meet a person face to face. Finally Dorothy ventured to speak, so she asked very softly and slowly, "Oh, little Bun Rabbit, so soft and so shy, say, what do you see with your big round eye?" "Many things," answered the rabbit, who was pleased to hear the girl speak in his own language. "In summertime I see the clover leaves that I love to feed upon, and the cabbages at the end of the farmer's garden. I see the cool bushes where I can hide from my enemies, and I see the dogs and the men long before they can see me, or know that I am near, and therefore I am able to keep out of their way." "Is that the reason your eyes are so big?" asked Dorothy. "I suppose so," returned the rabbit. "You see, we have only our eyes and our ears and our legs to defend ourselves with. We cannot fight, but we can always run away, and that is a much better way to save our lives than by fighting." "Where is your home, Bunny?" inquired the girl. "I live in the ground, far down in a cool, pleasant hole I have dug in the midst of the forest. At the bottom of the hole is the nicest little room you can imagine, and there I have made a soft bed to rest in at night. When I meet an enemy I run to my hole and jump in, and there I stay until all danger is over." "You have told me what you see in summer," continued Dorothy, who was greatly interested in the rabbit's account of himself. "But what do you see in the winter?" "In winter we rabbits," said Bunny so shy, "keep watch to see Santa go galloping by." "And do you ever see him?" asked the girl eagerly. "Oh, yes, every winter. I am not afraid of him, nor of his reindeer. And it is such fun to see him come dashing along, cracking his whip and calling out cheerily to his reindeer, who are able to run even swifter than we rabbits. And Santa Claus, when he sees me, always gives me a nod and a smile, and then I look after him and his big load of toys which he is carrying to the children until he has galloped away out of sight. I like to see the toys, for they are so bright and pretty, and every year there is something new amongst them. Once I visited Santa and saw him make the toys." "Oh, tell me about it," pleaded Dorothy. "It was one morning after Christmas," said the rabbit, who seemed to enjoy talking now that he had overcome his fear of Dorothy, "and I was sitting by the roadside when Santa Claus came riding back in his empty sleigh. He does not come home quite so fast as he goes, and when he saw me he stopped for a word. "You look very pretty this morning, Bun Rabbit," he said in his jolly way. "I think the babies would love to have you to play with." "I don't doubt it, your honor," I answered, "but they'd soon kill me with handling, even if they did not scare me to death, for babies are very rough with their playthings." "That is true," replied Santa Claus, "and yet you are so soft and pretty it is a pity the babies can't have you. Still, as they would abuse a live rabbit, I think I shall make them some toy rabbits which they cannot hurt. So if you will jump into my sleigh with me and ride home to my castle for a few days, I'll see if I can't make some toy rabbits just like you." Of course I consented, for we all like to please old Santa, and a minute later I had jumped into the sleigh beside him and we were dashing away at full speed toward his castle. I enjoyed the ride very much, but I enjoyed the castle far more, for it was one of the loveliest places you could imagine. It stood on the top of a high mountain and is built of gold and silver bricks, and the windows are pure diamond crystals. The rooms are big and high, and there is a soft carpet upon every floor, and many strange things scattered around to amuse one. Santa Claus lives there all alone, except for old Mother Hubbard, who cooks the meals for him, and her cupboard is never bare now, I can promise you. At the top of the castle there is one big room, and that is Santa's workshop, where he makes the toys. On one side is his workbench, with plenty of saws and hammers and jackknives, and on another side is the paint bench, with paints of every color and brushes of every size and shape. And in other places are great shelves where the toys are put to dry and keep new and bright until Christmas comes and it is time to load them all into his sleigh. After Mother Hubbard had given me a good dinner and I had eaten some of the most delicious clover I have ever tasted, Santa took me up into his workroom and sat me upon the table. "If I can only make rabbits half as nice as you are," he said, "the little ones will be delighted." Then he lit a big pipe and began to smoke, and soon he took a roll of soft fur from a shelf in a corner and commenced to cut it out in the shape of a rabbit. He smoked and whistled all the time he was working, and he talked to me in such a jolly way that I sat perfectly still and allowed him to measure my ears and my legs so that he could cut the fur into the proper form. "Why, I've got your nose too long, Bunny," he said once, and so he snipped a little off the fur he was cutting, so that the toy rabbit's nose should be just like mine. And again he said, "Good gracious, the ears are too short entirely." So he had to get a needle and thread and sew on more fur to the ears, so that they might be the right size. But after a time it was all finished, and then he stuffed the fur full of sawdust and sewed it up neatly, after which he put in some glass eyes that made the toy rabbit look wonderfully lifelike. When it was all done, he put it on the table beside me, and at first I didn't know whether I was the live rabbit or the toy rabbit. We were so much alike. "It's a very good job," said Santa, nodding his head at us pleasantly, "and I shall have to make a lot of these rabbits, for the little children are sure to be greatly pleased with them." So he immediately began to make another, and this time he cut the fur just the right size, so that it was even better than the first rabbit. "I must put a squeak in it," said Santa. So he took a box of squeaks from a shelf and put one into the rabbit before he sewed it up. When it was all finished he pressed the toy rabbit with his thumb, and it squeaked so naturally that I jumped off the table, fearing at first the new rabbit was alive. Old Santa laughed merrily at this, and I soon recovered from my fright, and was pleased to think the babies were to have such pretty playthings. "After this," said Santa Claus, "I can make rabbits without having you for a pattern, but if you like you may stay a few days longer in my castle and amuse yourself." I thanked him and decided to stay. So for several days I watched him making all kinds of toys, and I wondered to see how quickly he made them and how many new things he invented. "I almost wish I was a child," I said to him one day, "for then I, too, could have playthings." "Ah, you can run about all day, in summer and in winter, and enjoy yourself in your own way," said Santa. "But the poor little children are obliged to stay in the house in the winter, and on rainy days in the summer, and then they must have toys to amuse them and keep them contented." I knew this was true, so I only said admiringly, "You must be the quickest and the best workman in all the world, Santa." "I suppose I am," he answered. "But then, you see, I have been making toys for hundreds of years, and I make so many it is no wonder I am skillful. And now, if you are ready to go home, I'll hitch up the reindeer and take you back again." "Oh, no," said I. "I prefer to run by myself, for I can easily find the way, and I want to see the country." "If that is the case," replied Santa, "I must give you a magic collar to wear, so that you will come to no harm." So after Mother Hubbard had given me a good meal of turnips and sliced cabbage, Santa Claus put the magic collar around my neck, and I started for home. I took my time on the journey, for I knew nothing could harm me, and I saw a good many strange sights before I got back to this place again. "But what became of the magic collar?" asked Dorothy, who had listened with breathless interest to the rabbit's story. "After I got home," replied the rabbit, "the collar disappeared from around my neck, and I knew Santa had called it back to himself again. He did not give it to me, you see. He merely let me take it on my journey to protect me. The next Christmas, when I watched by the roadside to see Santa, I was pleased to notice a great many of the toy rabbits sticking out of the loaded sleigh. The babies must have liked them, too, for every year since I have seen them amongst the toys. Santa never forgets me, and every time he passes he calls out in his jolly voice, 'A Merry Christmas to you, Bun Rabbit! The babies still love you dearly.'" The rabbit paused, and Dorothy was just about to ask another question when Bunny raised his head and seemed to hear something coming. "What is it?" inquired the girl. "It's the farmer's big shepherd dog," answered the rabbit, "and I must be going before he sees me, or I shall have to run for my life. So good-bye, Dorothy. I hope we shall meet again, and then I will gladly tell you more of my adventures." The next instant he had sprung into the wood, and all that Dorothy could see of him was a gray streak darting in and out amongst the trees. End of Little Bun Rabbit. End of Mother Goose in Prose.
The Nativity of the Lord, from the Douay-Rheims version of the Bible, Matthew, chapter 1, verses 18 through 25. For LibriVox.org, narrated by Sean McKinley. Now the generation of Christ was in this wise. When as his mother Mary was espoused to Joseph, before they came together, she was found with child of the Holy Ghost. Whereupon Joseph, her husband, being a just man, and not willing publicly to expose her, was minded to put her away privately. But while he thought on these things, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in his sleep, saying, Joseph, son of David, Fear not to take unto thee Mary thy wife, for that which is conceived in her is of the Holy Ghost. And she shall bring forth a son, and thou shalt call his name Jesus, for he shall save his people from their sins. Now all this was done that it might be fulfilled which the Lord spoke by the prophet, saying, Behold, a virgin shall be with child, and bring forth a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which being interpreted is, God with us. And Joseph, rising up from sleep, did as the angel of the Lord had commanded him, and took unto him his wife. And he knew her not till she brought forth her firstborn son, and he called his name Jesus. End of the Nativity of the Lord. This recording is in the public domain.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Nativity from the Gospel of St. Luke, King James Version, read by Linda Wilcox. And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. And this taxing was first made when Cyrenius was governor of Syria. And all went to be taxed, every one into his own city. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, out of the city of Nazareth, into Judea, unto the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be taxed with Mary his espoused wife, being great with child. And so it was that while they were there, the days were accomplished that she should be delivered. And she brought forth her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. And there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. And lo, the angels of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them, and they were sore afraid. And the angel said unto them, Fear not, for, behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Saviour, which is Christ the Lord. And this shall be a sign unto you. Ye shall find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God, and saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, good will toward men. And it came to pass, as the angels were gone away from them into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, Let us now go even unto Bethlehem, and see this thing which is come to pass, which the Lord hath made known unto us. And they came with haste, and found Mary and Joseph, and the babe lying in a manger. And when they had seen it, they made it known abroad the saying which was told them concerning this child. And all they that heard it wondered at those things which were told them by the shepherds. But Mary kept all these things, and pondered them in her heart. And the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things that they had heard and seen, as it was told unto them. End of the Nativity from the Gospel of St. Luke, King James Version.
The offerings of the wise men, from the Douay-Rheims version of the Bible, Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 12, for LibriVox.org, narrated by Sean McKinley. When Jesus therefore was born in Bethlehem of Judah, in the days of King Herod, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to adore him. And King Herod, hearing this, was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling together all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where Christ should be born. But they said to him, In Jerusalem of Judah, for so it is written by the prophet, And thou, Bethlehem, the land of Judah, art not the least among the princes of Judah. For out of thee shall come forth the captain that shall rule my people Israel. Then Herod, privately calling the wise men, learned diligently of them the time of the star which appeared to them, and sending them into Bethlehem said, Go, and diligently inquire after the child, and when you have found him, bring me word again, that I also may come and adore him. Who having heard the king, went their way, and behold, the star which they had seen in the east went before them, until it came and stood over where the child was. And seeing the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. And entering into the house, they found the child with Mary his mother, and falling down, they adored him, and opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having received an answer in sleep that they should not return to Herod, they went back another way into their country. End of the offerings of the wise men. This recording is in the public domain.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information and to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reginald's Christmas Revel by Saki. Read for LibriVox.org by Dan Three Trees.
They say, said Reginald, that there's nothing sadder than victory except defeat. If you've ever stayed with dull people during what is alleged to be the festive season, you can probably revise that saying. I shall never forget putting in a Christmas at the Babwalds. Mrs. Babwald is some relation of my father's, a sort of to-be-left-till-called-for cousin, and that was considered sufficient reason for my having to accept her invitation at about the 6th time of asking, though why the sins of the father should be visited by the children. You won't find any notepaper in that drawer. That's where I keep old menus and first-night programs. Mrs. Babwald wears a rather solemn personality and has never been known to smile, even when saying disagreeable things to her friends or making out the stores list. She takes her pleasures sadly. A state elephant at a durbar gives one a very similar impression. Her husband gardens in all weathers. When a man goes out in the pouring rain to brush caterpillars off rose trees, I generally imagine his life indoors leaves something to be desired. Anyway, it must be very unsettling for the caterpillars. Of course there were other people there. There was a Major Somebody who had shot things in Lapland or somewhere of that sort. I forget what they were, but it wasn't for want of reminding. We had them cold with every meal almost, and he was continually giving us details of what they measured from tip to tip, as though he thought we were going to make them warm underthings for the winter. I used to listen to him with a rapt attention that I thought rather suited me, and then one day I quite modestly gave the dimensions of an okapi I had shot in the Lincolnshire fens. The Major turned a beautiful Tyrian scarlet. I remember thinking at the time that I should like my bathroom hung in that color, and I think that at that moment he almost found it in his heart to dislike me. Mrs. Babwald put on a first aid to the injured expression and asked him why he didn't publish a book of his sporting reminiscences. It would be so interesting. She didn't remember till afterwards that he had given her 2 fat volumes on the subject, with his portrait and autograph as a frontispiece and an appendix on the habits of the Arctic mussel. It was in the evening that we cast aside the cares and distractions of the day and really lived. Cards were thought to be too frivolous and empty a way of passing the time, so most of them played what they called a book game. You went out into the hall, to get an inspiration, I suppose. Then you came in again with a muffler tied round your neck and looked silly, and the others were supposed to guess that you were wee McGregor. I held out against the inanity as long as I decently could, but at last, in a lapse of good nature, I consented to masquerade as a book, only I warned them that it would take some time to carry out. They waited for the best part of 40 minutes while I went and played wine-glass skittles with the page boy in the pantry. You play it with a champagne cork, you know, and the one who knocks down the most glasses without breaking them wins. I won, with 4 unbroken out of 7. I think William suffered from over-anxiousness. They were rather mad in the drawing-room at my not having come back, and they weren't a bit pacified when I told them afterwards that I was at the end of the passage. "I never did like Kipling," was Mrs. Babwald's comment when the situation dawned upon her. "I couldn't see anything clever in Earthworms Out of Tuscany, or is that by Darwin?" Of course these games are very educational, but personally I prefer bridge. On Christmas evening we were supposed to be especially festive in the Old English fashion. The hall was horribly draughty, but it seemed to be the proper place to revel in, and it was decorated with Japanese fans and Chinese lanterns, which gave it a very Old English effect. A young lady with a confidential voice favored us with a long recitation about a little girl who died or did something equally hackneyed, and then the Major gave us a graphic account of a struggle he had with a wounded bear. I privately wished that the bears would win sometimes on these occasions. At least they wouldn't go vaporing about it afterwards. Before we had time to recover our spirits, we were indulged with some thought-reading by a young man whom one knew instinctively had a good mother and an indifferent tailor, the sort of young man who talks unflaggingly through the thickest soup and smooths his hair dubiously as though he thought it might hit back. The thought-reading was rather a success. He announced that the hostess was thinking about poetry, and she admitted that her mind was dwelling on one of Austen's odes, which was near enough. I fancy she had been really wondering whether a scrag end of mutton and some cold plum pudding would do for the kitchen dinner next day. As a crowning dissipation, they all sat down to play progressive Halma, with milk chocolate for prizes. I've been carefully brought up, and I don't like to play games of skill for milk chocolate, so I invented a headache and retired from the scene. I had been preceded a few minutes earlier by Miss Langston Smith, a rather formidable lady who always got up at some uncomfortable hour in the morning and gave you the impression that she had been in communication with most of the European governments before breakfast. There was a paper pinned on her door with a signed request that she might be called particularly early on the morrow. Such an opportunity does not come twice in a lifetime. I covered up everything except the signature with another notice, to the effect that before these words should meet the eye she would have ended a misspent life, was sorry for the trouble she was giving, and would like a military funeral. A few minutes later I violently exploded an air-filled paper bag on the landing, and gave a stage moan that could have been heard in the cellars. Then I pursued my original intention and went to bed. The noise these people made in forcing open the good lady's door was positively indecorous. She resisted gallantly, but I believe they searched her for bullets for about a quarter of an hour, as if she had been a historic battlefield. I hate traveling on Boxing Day, but one must occasionally do things that one dislikes. End of story. Reginald's Christmas Revel by Saki.
Speaking of Christmas by Paul Laurence Dunbar. Read for LibriVox.org by Douglas Nathaniel Williams. Breezes blowing middlin' brisk, snowflakes through the air a whisk, fallin' kinda soft and light. Not enough to make things white, but just sorta sifting down so as to cover up the brown of the dark world's rugged ways and make things look like holidays. Not smooth over, but just speckled, sort of straining for effect, and not quite a-getting through what it started in to do. Mercy sakes, it does seem queer. Christmas Day is most nigh here. Somehow, it don't seem to me Christmas like it used to be. Christmas with its ice and snow. Christmas of the long ago. You could feel it stir and hum weeks and weeks before it come. Something in the atmosphere told you when the day was near. Didn't need no almanacs, that was just one of nature's facts. Every cottage decked out gay, cedar wreaths and holly spray. And the stores, how they were dressed, tinsel till you couldn't rest. Every window fixed up packed candy canes and things like that. Noah's arks and guns and dolls and all kinds of falderalls. Then with the frosty bells a chime, sliding down the hills a time, right amidst the fun and din, Christmas come a-bustling in. Raised his cheery voice a call out a welcome to us all. Hale and hearty, strong and bluff, that was Christmas sure enough. Snow knee-deep and coasting fine. Frozen mill ponds all a-shine, seeming just to lay in wait, begging you to come and skate. And you'd get your gal and go stumping cheerily through the snow, feeling pleased and skeert and warm, 'cause she had a holt your arm. Why, when Christmas come in, we spent the whole glad day in glee, having fun and feasting high, and some courting on the sly. Busting in some neighbor's door, and then suddenly, before he could give his voice a lift, yelling at him, "Christmas gift!" Now, sich things are never heard. Merry Christmas is the word, but it's only change a name, and means giving just the same. There's too many new style ways now about the holidays. I'd just like once more to see Christmas like it used to be. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information and to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Thin Santa Claus, or The Christmas Yard That Was a Christmas Stocking, by Ellis Parker Butler. Mrs. Gratz opened her eyes and looked out at the drizzle that made the Christmas morning gray. Her bed stood against the window, and it was easy for her to look out. All she had to do was to roll over and pull the shade aside. Having looked at the weather, she rolled again onto the broad flat of her back and made herself comfortable for a while, for there was no reason why she should get up until she felt like it.
Such a Christmas,
she said good-naturedly to herself.
I guess such weathers is bad for Santy Claus. Maybe it is because of such weathers he don't come by my house. I don't blame him. So muddy.
She let her eyes close indolently. Not yet was she hungry enough to imagine the tempting odor of fried bacon and eggs, and she idly slipped into sleep again. She was in no hurry. She was never in a hurry. What is the use of being in a hurry when you own a good little house and have money in the bank and are a widow? What is the use of being in a hurry anyway? Mrs. Gratz was always placid and fat, and she always had been. What is the use of having money in the bank and a good little house if you are not placid and fat? Mrs. Gratz lay on her back and slept, placidly and fatly, with her mouth open, as if she expected Santa Claus to pass by and drop a present into it. Her dreams were pleasant. It was no disappointment to Mrs. Gratz that Santa Claus had not come to her house. She had not expected him. She did not even believe in him.
Yes,
she had told Mrs. Flannery next door, as she handed a little parcel of toys over the fence for the little Flannerys.
Once I believes in such a Santy Claus myself yet. I make me pretty good times then, but now I'm too old. I don't believe in such things, but I make pretty good times still. I have a good little house and money in the bank.
Suddenly Mrs. Gratz closed her mouth and opened her eyes. She smelled imaginary bacon frying. She felt real hunger, and slid out of bed and began to dress herself, and she had just buttoned her red flannel petticoat around her wide waist when she heard a silence, and paused. For a full minute she stood, trying to realize what the silence meant. The English sparrows were chirping as usual and making enough noise, but through their bickerings the silence still annoyed Mrs. Grotz, and then, quite suddenly again, she knew. Her chickens were not making their usual morning racket.
I bet you I know what it is, sure,
she said, and continued to dress as placidly as before. When she went down she found that she had won the bet. A week before 2 chickens had been stolen from her coop, and she had had a strong padlock put on the chicken house. Now the padlock was pried open, and the chicken house was empty, and 9 hens and a rooster were gone. Mrs. Grotz stooped and entered the low gate and surveyed the vacant chicken yard placidly. If they were gone, they were gone.
Such a Santy Claus,
she said good-naturedly.
I don't like such a Santy Claus taking away and not bringing. Pretty soon he don't have such a good name any more if he keeps up doing like this. People likes the bringing Santy Claus. I guess they don't think much of the taking away business. He gets a bad name quick enough if he does this much.
She turned to bend her head to look into the vacant chicken house, and stood still. She put out her foot and touched something her eyes had lighted upon, and the thing moved. It was a purse of worn black leather, soaked by the drizzle, but still holding the bend that comes to men's purses when worn long in a back trouser pocket. One end of the purse was muddy and pressed deep into the soft soil where a heel was tramped on it. Mrs. Grotz bent and picked it up. There was $900 in bills in the purse. Mrs. Grotz stood still while she counted the bills, and as she counted her hands began to tremble and her knees shook, and she sank on the doorsill of the chicken house and laughed until the tears rolled down her face. Occasionally she stopped to wipe her eyes, and the flood of laughter gradually died away into ripples of intermittent giggles that were like sobs after sorrow. Mrs. Grotz had no great sense of humor, but she could see the fun of finding $900. It was enough to make her laugh, so she laughed.
Goodness, such a Santy Claus,
she exclaimed with a final sigh of pleasure.
Such a Christmas present from Santy Claus. No wonder he is so fat yet when he eats 10 chickens in one night already, but I don't kick. I like me that Santy Claus all right. I believes in him purty good after this, I bet.
She went at once to tell Mrs. Flannery, and Mrs. Flannery was far more excited about it than Mrs. Grotz had been. She said it was the hand of retribution paying back the chicken thief, and the hand of justice repaying Mrs. Grotz for sending toys to the little Flannerys, and pure luck giving Mrs. Grotz what she always got, and a number of other things.
"'Tis the luck of you, Mrs. Grotz, ma'am,"
she said.
"And often I do be saying it is the Dutch for luck, meaning no disrespect to you. And the fatter the luckier, as I often told me old man, rest his soul. And him so thin. And Christmas morning at that, ma'am, which is nothing at all but the judgment of having on the dirty chicken thief, picking such a day for his thieving, when there's plenty other days in the year for him. Keep the money, ma'am, for it is yours by good rights. And I knew there'd be some good come to you the minute you handed me the presents for the kids. The good folks sure all gets their reward in this world, only some don't. And I'm only sorry mine is a pig instead of chickens. But not wishing you had the money yourself at all, but who would come to steal a pig? And them such loud squealers. And who do you suspicion it was, Mrs. Grotz, ma'am?
I think maybe I got me a present from Santy Claus, yes?
Said Mrs. Grotz.
And hear the woman,
said Mrs. Flannery.
D'ye hear that now? Well, true for you, ma'am, and stick to it. There's no telling who'll be claiming the money. And if ever Santa Claus brought a thing to a mortal soul, 'twas him brought you that. And 'twas only yesterday you were saying you'd no belief in him.
Yesterday I don't have no beliefs in him,
said Mrs. Gratz.
Today I have plenty of beliefs in him. I like him plenty. I don't care if he comes every year.
Sure not,
said Mrs. Flannery.
And you with the $900 in your pocket. I'd be glad of the chance. I'd believe in him myself for $450.
That afternoon, Mrs. Flannery, whose excitement had not abated in the least, went over to Mrs. Gratz to spend the afternoon talking to her about the money. She felt that it was good to be that near it, at any rate, and when one can make a whole afternoon's conversation out of what Mrs. Casey said to Mrs. O'Reilly about Mrs. McNeely, it is a shame to miss a chance to talk about $900. Mrs. Flannery was rocking violently and talking rapidly, and Mrs. Gratz was slowly moving her rocker and answering in monosyllables, when someone knocked at the door. Mrs. Gratz answered the knock. Her visitor was a tall, thin man, and he had a slouch hat, which he held in his hands as he talked. He seemed nervous, and his face wore a worried look, extremely worried. He looked like a man who had lost $900. But he did not look like Santa Claus. He was thinner and not so jolly-looking. At first Mrs. Gratz had no idea that Santa Claus was standing before her, for he did not have a sleigh bell about him, and he had left his red cotton coat with the white batting trimming at home. He stood in the door playing with his hat, unable to speak. He seemed to have some delicacy about beginning.
Well, what is it?
Said Mrs. Gratz. Her visitor pulled himself together with an effort.
Well, ma'am, I'll tell you.
He said frankly.
I'm a chicken buyer. I buy chickens. That's my business, dealing in poultry. So I came out today to buy some chickens.
On Christmas Day?
Asked Mrs. Gratz.
Well,
said the man, moving uneasily from one foot to the other.
I did come on Christmas Day, didn't I? I don't deny that, ma'am. I did come on Christmas Day. I'd like to go out and have a look at your chickens.
It ain't so usual for buyers to come buying chickens on Christmas Day, is it?
Interposed Mrs. Gratz good-naturedly.
Well, no, it ain't, and that's a fact.
Said the man uneasily.
But I always do. The people I buy chickens for is just as apt to want to eat chicken one day as another day, and more so. Turkey on Christmas Day and chicken the next for a change. That's what they always tells me. So I have to buy chickens every day. I hate to, but I have to, and if I could just go out and look around your chicken yard.
It was right there that Mrs. Gratz had a suspicion that Santa Claus stood before her.
But I don't sell such a chicken yard yet,
she said. The man wiped his forehead.
Sure not,
he said nervously.
I was going to say look around your chicken yard and see the chickens. I can't buy chickens without I see them, can I? Some folks might, but I can't with the kind of customers I've got. I've got mighty particular customers, and I pay extra prices so as to get the best for them. And when I go out and look around the chicken yard...
How much you pay for such nice, big, fat chickens, maybe?
Asked Mrs. Gratz.
Well, I'll tell you,
said the man.
7 cents a pound is regular, ain't it? Well, I pay 12. I'll give you 12 cents and pay you right now and take all the chickens you've got. That's my rule. But if you want to let me go out and see the chickens first and pick out the kind my regular customers like, I pay 20 cents a pound. But I won't pay 20 cents without I can see the chickens first.
Sure,
said Mrs. Gratz.
I wouldn't do it too. Maybe I go out and bring in a couple such chickens for you to look at, yes?
No, don't,
said the man impulsively.
Don't do it. It wouldn't be no good. I've got to see the chickens on the hoof, as I might say.
On the hoofs?
Said Mrs. Gratz.
Such poultry don't have no hoofs.
Running around,
explained the visitor.
Running around in the coop. I can tell if a chicken has got any disease that my trade wouldn't like if I see it running around in the coop. There's a lot in the way a chicken runs, in the way it hisses up its legs, for instance. That's what the trade calls it, on the hoof. So I'll just go out and have a look around the coop.
For 20 cents a pound, anybody could let buyers see their chickens on the hoof, I guess,
said Mrs. Gratz.
Now, that's the way to talk,
exclaimed the man.
Only I ain't got any such chickens,
said Mrs. Gratz.
So it ain't of use to look how they walk. So goodbye.
Now, say,
said the man, but Mrs. Gratz closed the door in his face.
"I guess such a Santy Claus come back yet,"
said Mrs. Gratz when she went into the room where Mrs. Flannery was sitting.
"but it ain't any use. He don't leave many more such presents."
The impudence of him!
exclaimed Mrs. Flannery.
"For $900 I could be impudent too,"
said Mrs. Gratz calmly.
"but I don't like such nowadays Santy Clauses coming back all the time. Once, when I believes in Santy Clauses, they don't come back so much."
The thin Santa Claus had not gone far. He had crossed the street and stood gazing at Mrs. Gratz's door, and now he crossed again and knocked. Mrs. Gratz arose and went to the door.
"I believe he comes back once yet,"
she said to Mrs. Flannery, and opened the door. He had indeed come back.
Now see here,
he said briskly.
Ain't your name Mrs. Gratz? Well, I knowed it was, and I knowed you was a widow lady, and that's why I said I was a chicken buyer. I didn't want to frighten you, but I ain't no chicken buyer.
"No?"
asked Mrs. Gratz.
No, I ain't. I just said that so I could get a look at your chicken yard. I've got to see it. What I am is chicken house inspector for the 9th Ward, and the mayor sent me up here to inspect your chicken house, and I've got to do it before I go away or lose my job. I'll go right out now, and it'll be all over in a minute."
"I guess it ain't some use,"
said Mrs. Gratz.
"I guess I don't keep any more chickens. They go too easy. Yesterday I have plenty, and today I haven't any."
That's it.
said the thin Santa Claus.
That's just it. That's the way tuberculosis bugs act, quick like that. They're a bad epidemic, tuberculosis bugs is. You see how they act. Yesterday you have chickens, and last night the tuberculosis bugs gets at them, and this morning they've eat them all up.
"Goodness!"
exclaimed Mrs. Gratz without emotion.
"With the feathers and the bones, too?"
Sure,
said the thin Santa Claus.
Why, them tuberculosis bugs is perfectly ravenous. Once they get started, they eat feathers and bones and feet and all. A chicken hasn't no chance at all. That's why the mayor sent me up here. He heard all your chickens was gone, and gone quick, and he says to me, "Tuberculosis bugs," that's what he says, and he says, "You ain't doing your duty. You ain't inspecting Mrs. Gratz's chicken coop. You go and do it, or you're fired, see?" He says that, and he says, "You inspect Mrs. Gratz's coop, and you kill off them bugs before they get into her house and eat her all up, bones and all."
"And feathers?"
asked Mrs. Gratz calmly.
No, he didn't say feathers. This ain't nothing to fool about. It's serious. So I'll go right out and have a look.
"I guess such bugs ain't been in my coop last night,"
said Mrs. Gratz carelessly.
"I ain't afraid of such bugs in winter time."
Well, that's where you make your mistake,
said the thin Santa Claus.
Winter is just the bad time for them bugs. The more a tuberculosis bug freezes up, the more dangerous it is. In summer they ain't so bad. They're soft like and squash up when a chicken gets them. But in winter they freeze up hard and get brittle. Then a chicken comes along and grabs one, and it busts into 1,000 pieces, and each piece turns into a new tuberculosis bug and busts into 1,000 pieces, and so on, and the chicken gets all filled full of tuberculosis bugs before it knows it. When a chicken snaps up one tuberculosis bug, it has 1,000,000 in it inside of half an hour, and that chicken don't last long. And when the bugs make for the house, what's that on your dress there now?
Mrs. Gratz looked at her arm indifferently.
"Nothing,"
she said.
I thought maybe it was a tuberculosis bug had got on you already,
said the thin Santa Claus.
If it was, you would be all eat up inside of half an hour. Them bugs is awful rapacious.
"Yes?"
inquired Mrs. Gratz with interest.
"Such strong bugs, too, is it not?"
You bet they are strong,
began the stranger.
"I should think so,"
interrupted Mrs. Gratz.
"to smash up padlocks on such chicken houses. You make me afraid of such bugs. I don't dare let you go out there to get your bones and feet all eat up by them. I guess not."
Well, you see,
said the thin Santa Claus, puzzled, and then he cheered up.
You see, I ain't afraid of them. I've been fumigated against them. Fumigated and antisepticized. I've been vaccinated against them by the Board of Health. I'll show you the mark on my arm if you want to see it.
"No, don't,"
said Mrs. Gratz.
"I'll let you go and look in that chicken coop if you want to, but it ain't no use. There ain't nothing there."
The thin Santa Claus paused and looked at Mrs. Gratz with suspicion.
Why, did you find it?
He asked.
Find what?
Asked Mrs. Gratz innocently, and the thin Santa Claus sighed and walked around to the back of the house. Mrs. Gratz went with him. As Mrs. Gratz watched the thin man search the chicken yard for tuberculosis bugs, all doubt that he was her Santa Claus left her mind. He made a most minute investigation, but he did it more as a man might search for a lost purse than as a health officer would search for germs. He even got down on his hands and knees and poked under the chicken house with a stick. And, when he had combed the chicken yard thoroughly, and had looked all through the chicken house, he even searched the denuded vegetable garden in the back yard, and looked over the fence into Mrs. Flannery's yard. Evidently he was not pleased with his investigation, for he did not even say good-bye to Mrs. Gratz, but went away looking mad and cross. When Mrs. Gratz went into her house, she took her seat in her rocking-chair and began rocking herself calmly and slowly.
"'T was him done it, sure,"
said Mrs. Flannery.
I don't like such come-agains much,
said Mrs. Gratz placidly.
I try me to believe in such a Santy Claus, but I like not such come-agains. In Germany did not Santy Claus come back so much. I don't like a Santy Claus should be so anxious. Still I believes in him, but if he has too many such come-agains, I don't believe in him much.
"I would be setting the place on him, Santa Claus or no Santa Claus,"
said Mrs. Flannery vindictively.
"The mean chicken thief."
Oh,
said Mrs. Gratz easily.
I guess I don't care much. Should a $900 Santy Claus steal some chickens, I ain't mad.
But she was a little provoked when another knock came at the door a few minutes later, and when, on opening it, she saw the thin Santa Claus before her again.
So,
she said,
Santy Claus is back yet once.
What's that?
asked the man suspiciously.
I say, what is it you want?
said Mrs. Gratz.
Oh,
said the man.
Well, I ain't a-going to fool with you no longer, Mrs. Gratz. I'm a-going to tell you right out what I am and who I am. I'm a detective of the police, and I'm looking up a mighty bad character.
I guess I know right where you find one,
said Mrs. Gratz politely.
Now, don't be funny,
said the thin Santa Claus peevishly.
Maybe you noticed I didn't say nothing when you spoke about that padlock being busted. Maybe you noticed how careful I looked over your chicken coop and how I looked over the fence into the next yard. Well, I won't fool you. I ain't no chicken yard inspector, and I ain't no chicken buyer. Them was just my detective disguises. I'm out detecting a chicken thief, just a plain, ordinary chicken thief, and what I come for is clues.
Yes,
said Mrs. Gratz.
And what is it? Such clues? I haven't any clueses.
The thin Santa Claus seemed provoked.
Now look here,
he said.
You may think this is funny, but it isn't. I have got to catch that chicken thief or I'll lose my job, and I can't catch him unless I have some clues to catch him with. Now, didn't you have some chickens stolen last night?
Chickens?
asked Mrs. Gratz.
No, I didn't have chickens stolen. Such tuberculosis bugs eat them, with feathers too, and bones, right off the hoofs. Ain't it a pity?
It may have been a blush of shame, but it was more like a flush of anger that overspread the face of the thin Santa Claus. He stared hard at the placid German face of Mrs. Gratz and decided she was too stupid to mean it, that she was not teasing him.
You don't catch on,
he said.
You see, there ain't any such things as tuberculosis bugs. I just made that up as sort of detective disguise. Them chickens wasn't eat by no bugs at all. They was stole, see? A chicken thief come right into the coop and stole them. Do you think any kind of bug could pry off a padlock?
Mrs. Gratz seemed to let this sink into her mind and to revolve there and get to feeling at home before she answered.
No,
she said at length.
I guess not. But Santa Claus could do it. Such a big fat man. Sure he could do it.
Why, you...
began the thin man crossly, and then changed his tone.
There ain't no such thing as Santa Claus,
he said as one might speak to a child. But even a chicken thief would not tell a child such a thing, I hope.
No?
queried Mrs. Gratz sadly.
No Santa Claus? and I was scared of it myself with such tuberclosis bugs around. He should not to have gone into such a chicken coop with so many bugs busting up all over. He had a right to have fumigated himself once, and now he ain't. He's all eat up, on the hoof, bones and feet and all, and such a kind man, too."
The thin Santa Claus frowned. He had half an idea that Mrs. Grotz was fooling with him, and when he spoke it was crisply.
"Now see here,"
he said.
"Last night somebody broke into your chicken coop and stole all your chickens. I know that, and he's been stealing chickens all round this town and all round this part of the country, too, and I know that. And this stealing has got to stop. I've got to catch that thief, and to catch him I've got to have a clue. A clue is something he has left around or dropped where he was stealing. Now, did that chicken thief drop any clues in your chicken yard? That's what I want to know. Did he drop any clues?"
"Maybe if he dropped some clues, those tuberclosis bugs eat them up,"
suggested Mrs. Grotz.
"They eats bones and feathers. Maybe they eat clues, too."
"Now, ain't that smart?"
sneered the thin Santa Claus.
"Don't you think you're funny? But I'll tell you the clue I'm looking for. Did that thief drop a pocketbook or anything like that?"
"Oh, a pocketbook,"
said Mrs. Grotz.
"How much should be in such a pocketbook, maybe?"
$900.
said the thin Santa Claus promptly.
"Goodness!"
exclaimed Mrs. Grotz.
"So much money all in one clues. Come out to the chicken yard once. I'll help hunt for clues, too."
The thin Santa Claus stood a minute looking doubtfully at Mrs. Grotz. Her face was large and placid and unemotional.
"Well,"
he said with a sigh,
"it ain't much use, but I'll try it again."
When he had gone, after another close search of the chicken yard and coop, Mrs. Grotz returned to her friend Mrs. Flannery.
"Purty soon I don't believe any more in Santy Claus at all,"
she said.
"Purty soon I have more beliefs in chicken thieves than in Santy Claus. Yet a while I beliefs in him, but one more of those come-agains and I don't."
"He'll not be coming back any more,"
said Mrs. Flannery positively.
"I'm wondering he came at all. The jail's so handy. All you have to do is call a cop."
"Sure,"
said Mrs. Grotz.
"but it is not nice I should put Santy Claus in jail. Such a liberal Santy Claus, too."
"Have it your own way, ma'am,"
said Mrs. Flannery.
"I'll own 'tis some different from chickens I stole. 'Tis hard to expend the affections on a bunch of chickens. But if anyone was to steal my pig, to jail he would go. Santa Claus or no Santa Claus, not but what ye have a kind heart anyway, ma'am. Not wanting to put the poor fella in jail. But he's already lost $900, which, goodness knows, you might have to hand back, was the law to take hand on it."
"So,"
said Mrs. Grotz.
"such is the law yet? All right, I don't believe in chicken thieves, no matter how much he comes back again. I stick me to Santy Claus. Always will I believe in Santy Claus. Chicken thieves gives, and wants to take away again, but Santy Claus is always giving and never taking."
"You're forgetting the chickens that was took,"
suggested Mrs. Flannery.
"Took?"
said Mrs. Grotz.
"Tooken,"
Mrs. Flannery corrected.
"Tooked?"
said Mrs. Grotz.
"I believes me not in Santy Claus that way. I believes he is a good old man. For givings I believes in Santy Claus, but for takings I believes in tuberclosis bugs."
"And the busted padlock, then?"
asked Mrs. Flannery.
"Ach!"
exclaimed Mrs. Grotz.
"Them reindeers is so frisky yet. They have a right to kick up and bust it, maybe."
Mrs. Flannery sighed.
"'Tis a grand thing to have faith, ma'am,"
she said.
"Yes,"
said Mrs. Grotz indolently.
"That's nice. And it is nice to have $900 more in the bank, ain't it?"
End of The Thin Santa Claus, or The Chicken Yard That Was a Christmas Stocking, by Ellis Parker Butler. Narration read by Betsy Bush.
"Mrs. Flannery" by Laura.
Mrs. Grotz, read by Kara Schallenberg.
Thin Santa is read by Bill Kuhn.
"'Twas the Night Before Christmas" by Clement C. Moore, read for LibriVox.org by Hannah Swain on August 15th, 2006. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads, and Mamma in her kerchief, and I in my cap, had just settled down for a long winter's nap. When out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from the bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore up the shutters, and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new-fallen snow gave the lustre of midday to objects below, when, what to my wondering eyes should appear, but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer. With a little old driver, so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be St. Nick. More rapid than eagles his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donder and Vixen, to the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now dash away, dash away, dash away all. As dry leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle, mount to the sky, so up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with the sleigh full of toys and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. I drew in my head and was turning around. Down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was all dressed in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked just like a peddler, just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples so merry. His cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard of his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in its teeth, and the smoke it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a round little belly that shook when he laughed, like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him, in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying his finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod, up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim, ere he drove out of sight, Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. Merry Christmas!
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, a Visit from St. Nicholas, by Clement C. Moore. Read for LibriVox.org by Gemma Blythe. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And Mamma in her kerchief and I in my cap had just settled our brains for a long winter's nap, when out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from the bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new-fallen snow gave the lustre of midday to objects below, when what to my wandering eyes should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer. With a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be St. Nick. More rapid than eagles his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donder and Blitzen, to the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now dash away, dash away, dash away all. As dry leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle, mount to the sky, so up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with the sleigh full of toys, and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry, his cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard of his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying his finger aside of his nose and giving a nod, up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim, ere he drove out of sight, "Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night." End of 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. This recording is in the public domain. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus by Francis Barcellus Church. Read for LibriVox.org by Gemma Blythe and Ellen King.
Dear Editor, I am 8 years old. Some of my little friends say there is no Santa Claus. Papa says if you see it in the sun, it's so. Please tell me the truth. Is there a Santa Claus? Virginia O'Hanlon, 115 West 95th Street.
Virginia, your little friends are wrong. They have been affected by the skepticism of a skeptical age. They do not believe except what they see. They think that nothing can be which is not comprehensible by their little minds. All minds, Virginia, whether they be men's or children's, are little. In this great universe of ours, man is a mere insect, an ant, in his intellect, as compared with the boundless world about him, as measured by the intelligence capable of grasping the whole of truth and knowledge. Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. He exists certainly, as love and generosity and devotion exist. And you know that they abound and give to your life its highest beauty and joy. Alas, how dreary would be the world if there were no Santa Claus. It would be as dreary as if there were no Virginias. There would be no childlike faith then, no poetry, no romance, to make tolerable this existence. We should have no enjoyment except in sense and sight. The eternal light which childhood fills the world would be extinguished. Not believe in Santa Claus? You might as well not believe in fairies. You might get your papa to hire men to watch in all the chimneys on Christmas Eve to catch Santa Claus. But even if they did not see Santa Claus coming down, what would that prove? Nobody sees Santa Claus, but that is no sign that there is no Santa Claus. The most real things in the world are those that neither children nor men can see. Did you ever see fairies dancing on the lawn? Of course not, but that's no proof that they are not there. Nobody can conceive or imagine all the wonders there are unseen and unseeable in the world. You tear apart the baby's rattle and see what makes the noise inside. But there is a veil covering the unseen world which not the strongest man, nor even the united strength of all the strongest men that ever lived, could tear apart. Only faith, fancy, poetry, love, romance can push aside that curtain and view and picture the supernal beauty and glory beyond. Is it all real? Ah, Virginia, in all this world there is nothing else real and abiding. No Santa Claus, thank God he lives, and he lives forever. 1,000 years from now, nay, 10 times 10,000 years from now, he will continue to make glad the heart of childhood. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Is There a Santa Claus? From the editorial page of the New York Sun, September 21, 1897. We take pleasure in answering thus prominently the communication below, expressing at the same time our great gratification that its faithful author is numbered among the friends of the Sun.
Dear Editor, I am 8 years old. Some of my little friends say there is no Santa Claus. Papa says if you see it in the sun, it's so. Please tell me the truth. Is there a Santa Claus? Virginia O. Hanlon, 115 West 95th Street.
Virginia, your little friends are wrong. They have been affected by the skepticism of a skeptical age. They do not believe except they see. They think that nothing can be which is not comprehensible by their little minds. All minds, Virginia, whether they be men's or children's, are little. In this great universe of ours, man is a mere insect, an ant, in his intellect as compared with the boundless world about him, as measured by the intelligence capable of grasping the whole of truth and knowledge. Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. He exists as certainly as love and generosity and devotion exist, and you know that they abound and give to your life its highest beauty and joy. Alas, how dreary would be the world if there were no Santa Claus! It would be as dreary as if there were no Virginias. There would be no childlike faith then, no romance to make tolerable this existence. We should have no enjoyment except in sense and sight. The eternal light with which childhood fills the world would be extinguished. Not believe in Santa Claus? You might as well not believe in fairies. You might get your papa to hire men to watch in all the chimneys on Christmas Eve to catch Santa Claus. But even if you do not see Santa Claus coming down, what would that prove? Nobody sees Santa Claus, but that is no sign that there is no Santa Claus. The most real things in the world are those that neither children nor men can see. Did you ever see fairies dancing on the lawn? Of course not, but that's no proof that they are not there. Nobody can conceive or imagine all the wonders there are unseen and unseeable in the world. You tear apart the baby's rattle and see what makes the noise inside, but there is a veil covering the unseen world which not the strongest man, nor even the united strength of all the strongest men that ever lived, could tear apart. Only faith, fancy, poetry, love, romance can push aside that curtain and view and picture the supernal beauty and glory beyond. Is it all real? Ah, Virginia, in all this world there is nothing else real and abiding. No Santa Claus? Thank God he lives, and he lives forever. 1,000 years from now, Virginia, nay, 10 times 10,000 years from now, he will continue to make glad the heart of childhood. End of Is There a Santa Claus? Recorded by The Two Bears.